Yo, we're live. All right, we're here. We're covering Cormac McCarthy's Outer Dark today. This is the first of what I hope is going to be a series with our friend Tristan Haggard here, who everybody knows. I don't need to introduce him, but
Oh,
let's introduce him anyway. Tristan Haggard here, who was very generous, and I was on one of my first streams was on his channel way back in the day. The real ones will know, the folks at home.
real
So
ones will
the
remember.
real ones who've been
Yeah,
here
those
for a
were
while.
some
And
good ones, man. We did
yeah, I'm
we
really
did Notes from the Underground. Remember that was a great stream.
that's right. We did. And I'm pretty excited about this one because I've done a bunch of McCarthy and I know that you're excited about Cormac McCarthy. So it's time to get back to some literature. So tell the folks at home what's going on. What's going on with you? Let's get into it.
What's going on, guys? Yeah, no, it's an honor to be here. I love the channel. Obviously, I'm a huge friend of the channel, and you know what I must admit though, I'm really anti-spoiler. And for me, I don't care about plot point spoilers, but like I like to go into a book as blind as possible. So I get excited after I read a book that you've already analyzed, so I can listen to your analysis afterwards and kind of have a conversation with you in my head afterwards. But I'm glad we got to sync up on this one because Outer Dark is just, I thought it was a fantastic novel. I think we were talking earlier about Cormac, and I haven't read all of Cormac McCarthy's works, but I'll get there. I'll get there soon. I'm kind of pecking my way through all of them. The first one I read was what was your first Cormac McCarthy novel you read?
The first one was No Country for Old Men, and I kind of went through them. So I think we've done 7 here. I did No Country for Old Men, The Road. We covered The Counselor, the film. Blood Meridian was within the first year. We did The Passenger right when that came out, The Crossing, and All the Pretty Horses. And so now we're going to do Outer Dark. I cannot wait until Child of God because I won't spoil it for anybody, but I started off being really worried about the book, and you could tell if you've read it what you'd be worried about it. I was a little bit worried about it, and it really this book and Child of God really blew me away. I also need to do Cities of the Plain, which is the final part of the Border trilogy, and then I just picked up Sutri and the Orchard Keeper. So I think that'll be all. There's another McCarthy there's a 2-parter. He did is Stella Maris. He did that and The Passenger. So we'll see about that. But it's interesting you say about spoilers because it is. I'm not bothered by spoilers at all, and I understand when people are because the novel to analyze a novel I think really depends on both it's sort of a micro and macrocosmic view of the novel, and that certainly fits with McCarthy because he writes in pretty cosmic terms. He writes in a specific locus where, for instance, in this book Outer Dark, he is in Appalachistan. I mean, this is different from his other books, which seem to be either post-apocalyptic or set in the Old West, and this one is really in a kind of Scots-Irish 19th century location, but it has what I think
it seems like it maybe takes place in like 1890s, 1880s. Yeah. It doesn't place itself temporally. It's kind of it feels like it inhabits this timeless Appalachian atmosphere, right? This very kind of pre-modern. It feels very much like a parable, right? It feels more like a parable than it does a novel. And it's in this kind of timeless, like weird space that, it's interesting when you look at the progression of his writing, right, and his life. Like he moved from like around the Knoxville, Tennessee area, I think, and he moved out west to he was in like El Paso when he was studying or when he was researching for Blood Meridian. But before that, he wrote like all these Appalachian novels. I've never read The Orchard Keeper. That's the one that I don't know. It seems like it's the least favorite of all his novels, his first work. So I don't know if I'll ever read The Orchard Keeper just because I don't know. Maybe once I get through the rest of his novels. But this is his second work, Outer Dark, and it's amazing to think this is the second piece of work that the man published. I think if he hadn't written everything he wrote after this. They became wildly popular after after. Well, I guess All the Pretty Horses kind of put him on the map. But if he hadn't written all these other novels, I think this would stand alone as like one of the great 20th century novels. I think especially as a piece of like Southern Gothic fiction. You know, you can tell he's influenced by Flannery O'Connor. There's another influence I would say that I haven't really heard anybody talk about is Dostoevsky's Demons. Dostoevsky's Demons is kind of permeates throughout this novel as well, and we'll get to that a little bit later when we get to the the themes and some of the crucial scenes in this book. But yeah, as far as spoilers go, I don't know. For me, I feel like I enjoy a novel more if I know less about it going in. I like to get a recommendation. Someone's like, "Oh, you got to read this book," and if it's I don't have like a criteria for I'll read that or I won't read that, but I tend not to read very much a lot of modern stuff. I don't know. I don't care much for like any postmodern lit or like new sci-fi. I'm not interested at all. Like cyberpunk, steampunk, new sci-fi stuff. I'm sick of all that crap. But I like to just kind of go into it blind and see if I like it. And I've yet to find a Cormac McCarthy novel that I don't love. So I'm trying to find a shitty one.
Yeah, it's you bring up recommendations, and I ask the high IQ chat here for recommendations sometimes because we need something outside of the purview of what I have in stacks. And my general rule for recommendations is oftentimes, especially for people all the time ask me about reading and how they get back into reading or how they get their kids to read. And my recommendation for their recommendation is basically like to not recommend books because when people this has happened my whole life when people give me books to read, they go really on the bottom of a stack off. I mean, because my reading is so particular. I mean, it's just and they mean well, and I mean to read them, and sometimes I do, but when I get recommendations from the audience here and from all of the high IQ special beings, I mean, I read those. I've done a lot of those, but I think that Cormac McCarthy is sort of outside of that. I think that for people like us and for anyone here, if you want to get into reading, for me, the criteria for reading is violence. And what I mean by that is that I like books. I like novels, and I especially like poems that are visceral and violent. They have a real they have something electric in the words. And Harold Bloom is sort of my guide with a lot of this stuff. Harold Bloom, which is where I started learning about this. I sat next to him at a reading one time, and he grumbled the whole time. It was an Adrian.
Did he take up 2 seats?
I was living in New York, and I went to the 92nd Street Y to this Adrian Rich poetry reading, which is you can look up who she is if you're.
I've never heard of this.
Yeah, she's whatever. She's exactly like you would think. And he sat next to me, and he was like the Leviathan, like in Moby Dick. I mean, he's this huge guy, and he sat, and I heard his stomach grumbling the whole time, and he would like audibly, he'd be like, and terrible. And so he's been, sort of my guide with a lot of this stuff. He does, he is a real, I think probably a lot of the Gnostic elements of literature, and that's not me, but I'm saying in terms of the way that we look at literature and his sort of paradigm tends to be overtly Gnostic, and that it's refreshing in a way, and because at least he's saying so. So, like for instance, he's got this book Omens of the Millennium. There's another book, Genius. His book, the Invention of the Human. They all sort of take place in various like segments of the Sephiroth. So I'm reading it, and I'm like, I'm not a Kabbalist. I don't care about that, but at least I know this guy is overtly. So it's not hidden.
Well, it's funny because he tends to read it, and I think you and I talked about this a little bit in DMs about like people reading. I think people read Gnosticism into everything.
They do
sometimes where it's not there. Like I'll there's some things that I'll read, and I'm like, I'll look at some of the analyses that other people do, and a lot of the more popular booktubers One of them in particular, like every one of his things, just like this book. Why this book is a Gnostic journey. This book, a Gnostic book. It's like every book is Gnostic. Well, I think we just live in a pretty Gnostic culture, and like postmodernism is quite Gnostic, and Western expansionism. Like I think, for instance, Blood Meridian. I think the Gnostic reading of it is overdone. I think there are Gnostic aspects to the judge as a character, but I don't think the voice of the novel is itself Gnostic. And I think the more you read McCarthy, the narrator of McCarthy is not an omniscient third. There's not an omniscient third person narration happening. It's at times it seems like it, but actually the narration zooms in and out into the feelings and the sentiment and the like. Kind of what McCarthy does really well with this narration is he gets into the mind of the character while making you feel like it's this third person objective perspective. So I think when McCarthy says something like it, like the passage in The Crossing, where Billy Parham's sitting at the fire with the wolf, and it's the the wolf's eyes are, I don't know if I could find the passage right now, but he gets into the mind of the characters often, and then people will assume that we're listening to some third person narration. And I think with Blood Meridian, there are Gnostic aspects of it, but I think Moby Dick is more Gnostic than Blood Meridian in a lot of ways.
I was going to say that Moby Dick, and again, it's kind of in a way, it's kind of a credit to Harold Bloom talking about this stuff, because he's not the one who wrote the works. He's just writing an analysis of the works and sort of pointing out, for instance, the Moby Dick analysis that he did is one of the first works I read where it discussed a Gnostic paradigm for a novel. When I was a teenager, I'd never read that before. That doesn't mean that it's something that I sort of grab onto, or want. It's just what it is in the book, and that has really become something that is prevalent in almost every book and every film, in a way, like you were just stating. I think that what's interesting is that this book, Outer Dark, does not seem to take that. It's almost like an anti-parable, or like a reversal of salvation, which is not necessarily Gnostic, but it's a kind of statement of, like you were mentioning how McCarthy writes sort of almost outside of time. The way that he writes is completely different from other people. And I think that part of that is that it suits the narrative here. In Outer Dark, it's almost like we have characters who are wandering in the outer darkness, in oblivion. They are completely lost in this outer realm where they are outside. They're almost outside of salvation or damnation. They are just completely like almost ethereal spirits in a way. And yet it takes place in a concrete world where it seems to verge on fatalistic, nihilism, nothingness. But it doesn't. It actually doesn't end up that way. It's pretty nuanced, I think, and and certainly Blood Meridian is one of his most infamous works. I think a lot of people still have not read the work, and they probably should. We were talking earlier about when we were texting about sort of. I mentioned like that. I think there are like four sort of pillars of postmodernism, and I think McCarthy fits into this, although he's outside of it. And
what are the pillars of postmodernism?
For me, it would be Don DeLillo, J.G. Ballard, Bret Easton Ellis, and Cormac McCarthy. All four writers are totally distinct from one another, and they all have different subject matter, different time, place. Everything's different. Their writing styles are completely different, but they all sort of point to this world that is outside of the normal bounds of what came before. So for instance, like, the novel, it's funny to think that the novel is like 200 years old. I mean, Don Quixote is the first novel, but then there are novels in the 1700s, and then Charles Dickens really made the novel, and that's like a serialized form of prose. But really,
like Dostoevsky was serialized as well, and he's pretty influential in a lot of these more modern writers. But I think if you were to take notes from the underground and you didn't know who wrote that, where, and when they wrote it, you probably kind of say, "Oh, there's a postmodern novel as well," right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Like,
no. When we covered it, that's exactly what I thought. That you made a point of he was the what did you say he was the first edgelord?
yeah, kind of the first troll,
The first, yeah.
the first I mean, it was about an incel essentially, right? The book,
but J.G. Ballard is interesting because he has this veneer of being a popular writer, almost like a mass market paperback writer, but he is not that. And he's interesting because he said that he writes a lot about the future, and he says that the future will not be anything like we think it's going to be in a high-tech sci-fi and fantasy. It will be boring. It will be totally mundane. And all the things that we think are going to be interesting are just going to end up killing us. And we sort of live in this gray brutalist world. That's the way the world is being made. Bret Easton Ellis writes in a way which is interesting because there's a kind of correlation between the book Glamorama. I always think of Glamorama when I think of Moby Dick, because Moby Dick is 400 or 500 pages, and the first 300 pages are like the ins and outs of the whale, the spermaceti, like how to how is a harpoon made.
Chapter. The cetology chapter is actually really fun too, because he manages to make that like a funny read. He's kind of he gets a little meta in there as well.
And Bret Easton Ellis takes that in Glamorama and he just makes it. He just does the same thing, but it's for like fashion labels and for like capitalist advertising. So it's just like 300 pages of names of labels. And there's this weird like sort of anti-poetry that develops with the book, because you're like, why is there so much of this? And then it's because it informs the actions that happen in the rest of it, because that book is Zoolander, basically. Zoolander, he sued, I think he sued Ben Stiller for Zoolander because it's the same plot. It's a monarch, male model assassin. Oh, that's funny. And then Don DeLeo is like Cormac McCarthy in that it's like almost like a whole new, it's English, but it's a whole new language. And his book White Noise is like almost written like it's written in electricity. All of it's like the letter Z and the letter X constantly throughout the book.
Why I don't know. I don't know how McCarthy would fit into the postmodern. And I think maybe some of the audience who are used to hearing the word postmodern, they're used to hearing it from like Jordan Peterson, where it's like, well, there's a difference between postmodern lit and post. It's not just postmodern philosophy. We're not talking about, we're not talking about like all these writers are Fabian socialists, like cultural Marxists or anything like that. We're talking about this literary categories of like modernism and then postmodernism following modernism. Whereas like Joyce kind of being the modern, the initiation of the modernist writer. But I think Dostoevsky was every bit as creative as Joyce. He wasn't like a linguist like Joyce was, and he wrote serialized novels, so they tend to be a little bit sometimes long and meandering because he's just trying to. So Dostoevsky was trying to fill pages with some of these, but it's still like if you were to, I think if he were to have more time to distill it, if it was a different era and he wasn't getting paid, monthly to publish a chapter, it would still be just as brilliant, like a book like Demons, which we'll quote from a little bit later when we talk about more about Outer Dark. But I think McCarthy, I see him as more like a modern writer. Like I see him as being like Steinbeck, like Faulkner, Melville. I just, for me, he inhabits that space, being that the timelessness that you feel from him. To me, that contrasts a little bit with like the more futurist stuff. But and McCarthy very rarely uses. He actually does use the word android one time in I'm sure you marked it in Outer Dark. He uses the term android. I was surprised by that, and that's one of the things that annoys
bird flu.
Bird flu. Yeah, that's in Child of God. Bird flu. That bugged the hell out of me, and now I just love it though. Bird flu. It's a sentence.
It's perfect.
But yeah, he uses android in here in one of these descriptions. I thought that was weird. That was kind of outside of his. It's outside of his symbolic lexicon for all the rest of his novels. Like there's
two things. I think that postmodern philosophy is crosses over into literature, but is distinct from it in a couple ways. I think that talking about Baudrillard and simulacrum and simulation is too. That's outside of my. I'm too slow for that. I'll leave it to other people to do that. But in literature, postmodernism is defined really by one event, and it's that it's the atomic bomb. So the modernist movement to me is like The Great Gatsby with the Valley of Ashes and T.S. Eliot's Wasteland.
But do you think I would say I haven't read all of McCarthy, but what I've seen so far, there's no indicate like even in this post World War II, All the Pretty Horses is post World War II. The father of John Grady Cole is a World War II vet. He's a little bit messed up from the war. He's screwed up. He dies young, but you don't get a sense of the existence of this atomic age or a world.
But so the novel that really I think relates to that is The Road, because it exists in a world where everything is burned, and it's different from a modernist perspective. The modernist perspective has a kind of chaos and this kind of alienation that occurs because of the broken, fragmentary world as a post-industrial revolution thing. And it also has elements, like you were talking about Steinbeck, it has elements of naturalism that sort of still seep into it. But
right, and McCarthy loves that stuff. But yeah, you're right about The Road. The Road is this different space.
But the difference between something like Frank Norris's McTeague or like Steinbeck with McCarthy is that in those novels, we have characters who are walking around. They're walking around in a landscape that is an actual landscape, and they are looking at concrete things, and they are concerned with the thing itself. And in McCarthy, we have at least a pseudo spiritual or a metaphysical world that abounds on the fringes of that. So there's an alienation that occurs between the characters and what we think of the characters and where they are and how they are lost in some sort of spiritual dimension. And also in the end, none of the labels really matter at all anyway.
Right. And I think that's what we're getting at. We're both saying kind of the same thing and giving arguments for why he inhabits this space in between. And I think this is the importance of McCarthy is like, I mean, it's hard to define his writing, but it's not inaccessible. It's very accessible, especially
extremely accessible. Yeah.
I don't know about women. I don't hear that. I think some women like McCarthy, but I think it's for the male, like Anglo-American. I think he speaks to the soul of the male Anglo-American. I think that's. I found this quote from The Crossing. You'll like this one. It actually is talking about exactly what you say. He says, what was here to be found was not a thing. Things separate from their stories have no meaning. They're only shapes of a certain size and color, a certain weight. When their meaning has become lost to us, they no longer have even a name. The story, on the other hand, can never be lost from its place in the world, for it is that place. And that is what was to be found there, the corrido, the tale. And like all corridos, it ultimately told one story only, for there is only one to tell. So paragraph.
That's cool. That's kind of like a commentary on the commentary, which is
it's meta. It's talking about narrative and
that's also a self-styled statement on something like a very modernist sentiment, which is like in Imagist poetry, William Carlos Williams, that no ideas but in thing. So basically, the modernists, especially in verse, had a distinction from the Victorian and Edwardian sense of literature, which was that the style was what governed the content. And in modernist literature, it was the thing itself. So in other words, like literature is built of words. It's not made of ideas. It's made of actual words. And that sort of crosses over that seems like sort of a ludicrous or like really obvious statement to most people, I think, but that crosses over into what we're reading now because, God, I lost my train of thought.
You talk about the words and naming things and labels, and I mean this is a theme in Outer Dark, the naming of something and the power of that.
Yeah, because because the speaker in his books is clearly a lover of words. And I think that what's interesting is that most novels that we read and much of literature, I mean, there are really only two like labels that matter in literature, and that's good and bad.
I like
And
that. I love that. I love when you
most
say that.
literature is bad. It's not
Yeah.
great. And that doesn't mean it's that's not a highbrow thing to say. It just means that it's bad in terms of it might be. It's the kind of novel like that my dad would pick up at like the train station on the way to like DC or something. Like he picks it up, he reads it, he loves it, and then when he's done with the paperback, he throws it away because he doesn't have room
forget
for
about
it.
you never think about it again,
Yeah,
right?
and
There's
that's
something
fine.
in every one of Cormac's novels that like it stays with you, and it doesn't like break you, but it's something that like there's so much. I hate when these libtards say that McCarthy is a nihilist. To me, it's like like I can't believe anybody could read McCarthy and see him as not like like an extension of like a Flannery O'Connor type worldview, right? Like he's so not a nihilist to me, but he's grappling with those ideas, and I'm sure at times he did flirt with it. I mean, you could tell like I think he is the voice in his novel is overtly anti-nihilist.
Yeah.
And
if you have nihilism in a book and it crosses over into your thoughts don't matter and your words don't matter, then there's no point in reading the book itself, because the words you've just spent time putting on the page, it don't matter. And this kind of this can like this threatens to occur in something like Crispy mentioned Celine earlier. I covered Journey to the End of the Night, and also Sartre's The Rebel. I mean, or The Stranger. It sort of threatens to happen in existentialist works, but with
that's
McCarthy,
Camus. That's the only Camus that
Camus. Yeah, who did I say? Sartre? No, yeah, Camus. And but like on page 21 of this book, he says, when the sun had gone, he went on in darkness, the child quiet again, as if motion were specific against anything that ailed it. The moon came up and grew small, and the road before him went white. He jangled on through an ice blue light in his amulet of sound. It's like
amulet of sound.
Yeah, it's synesthetic. It's
yeah,
you know.
I love that. I love he distills all this feeling and meaning in every sentence, every word.
Well, his language really is like onomatopoetic. I mean, language itself, especially the English language, mimics the sound of objects and things more than more than the Romance languages. And it's a kind of Germanic sentiment as to the importance of things. And so you get the sense that you're if Coleridge said that poetry is the best words in the best order, then this is poetry. It's certainly a kind of prose poetry, but it exists as a kind of real testament to what literature is supposed to be, more than I think most things that you would read. I mean, not only does the narrative drive, so we should talk about what the book is about.
We haven't even we barely talk about the book at all.
Yeah,
we're just gonna retitle this like
because not only does the narrative drives, and it is a kind of odyssey, but it's in this place where you are seriously afraid of what's going to happen.
And not that much happens that's very fearful until the end. I love the menace. You feel this menacing, this brooding menace that's right behind the narrative, but it's not a violent book until you get, farther along.
It's not a violent book until it becomes extremely violent, and it's not a violence like Blood Meridian, which is it is a much more, in a way, it's a much more spiritually violent book, I think, than Blood Meridian is. In Blood Meridian, that the characters are engaged in a kind of hellish activity, and you have this real devil man, who's leading this gang, and everybody in it is so violent. But that's the violence of actions. The violence in this is like the violence of the soul, and So do you want to give a rundown of like what happens in this book?
Yeah, well,
Or
let's start out just with the title, right? Because there's so much there right in the title. So outer dark, obviously the biblical reference, right? You've got 3 points here. I got to pull up right here where you get the term outer darkness or exterior darkness in the New Testament. There could be some in the Old Testament, but in the New Testament, you've got in the Gospel according to St. Matthew. And I say to thee that many shall come from the east and the west, and shall sit down with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the children of the kingdom shall be cast out into the outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So I'd say this book is about the weeping and the gnashing of teeth. There's the parable of the king and the guest, the king setting for the servants and the guest at his wedding, and those that come not dressed in their proper wedding garments, not prepared for the wedding, being cast out into the outer darkness. And cast ye the unprofitable servants in outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth, is how the parable of the talents ends, right? So God gives 1 talent to one man, 5 talents to another, 10 talents to another man, and those who multiply their talents rather than just burying them into the earth and thinking, well, I'll save it by burying it in the earth. Those that went out into the world and did something with what they had, they were not cast into that outer darkness. But the servant, from he who has much will be. How's it go? So those are the three times when outer darkness is mentioned, and so I think we start out in the novel. The first piece that we see, it starts out with they crested out on the bluff in the late afternoon sun, with their shadows long on the sawgrass and burnt sedge, moving single file and slowly high above the river, and with something of its own implacability, pausing and grouping for a moment, going on again, strung out in silhouette against the sun, and then dropping under the crest of the hill into a fold of blue shadow, with light touching them about the head in spurious sanctity, until they had gone on for such a time as saw the sun down altogether, and they moved in shadow altogether, which suited them very well. And this is describing these 3 men who we don't know who they are. You don't even the book is punctuated with the beginning of the novel in italicized prose, in this poetic italicized prose, describing the actions of these 3 men who actually end up being kind of this almost inverted trinity of darkness. They're this triad of demons, essentially, right? These characters.
Yeah,
And they're
3 Furies,
pursuing exactly. They're like the Furies. And they're pursuing Kulla. Kulla isn't named for, I forget when he's actually named. And the naming of things and the naming of characters is a big theme throughout this novel. But we get introduced to a man who is shook up from a dream. She shook him awake into the quiet darkness. Hush, she said, quit hollering. He said, what? He said, what? She shook him awake from dark to dark, delivered out of the clamorous rabble under a black sun and into a night more dolorous, sitting upright and cursing beneath his breath in the bed he shared with her, and the nameless weight in her belly. So the namelessness of the child, the namelessness of all the characters, is something that we see right away. And it actually, like classic McCarthy, he's so good at either starting or ending a novel with a dream. And it's kind of almost, it's like a cliche that he does it so well. Like the end of No Country for Old Men. I can't read the last chapter of that without getting a little tear in my eye, get a little choked up, because it's just almost all the McCarthy novels. It's hard to read the end of them without getting a little tear in the eye. Except the Outer Dark. I would say Outer Dark was not one of those tear jerkers. It's one of those you're just like, huh, whoa. That's
well, color kind of sounds like, these are Scots Irish people, or that it brings to mind culpability, or the fact that he's going to cull this child.
Cole,
Cole, and we don't know what's going to happen yet, but I certainly get a sense of there are 3, instead of 3 wise men, there are 3 plagues headed towards a kind of a stable. And instead of a child that is going to be, that we're going to see is God and man, and is going to take on the sins of the whole world and give us salvation, he's going to be a child who is going to be lost in the darkness. And we don't know what's going to happen to him yet. But the fact that he's nameless from the very beginning, imbues us with this sense of darkness that these characters are. So my English teacher once said to me that there was something worse than there's salvation and then there's damnation, but there's something else, which is, and especially in literature, which is obliteration. That there's this dark region in literature where characters wander around without a name, and they are just a non-entity, and that almost is, or that they never existed in the first place. And they're
nothing, no one.
Exactly,
That's
a
one of the
no
lines in the
man.
book.
Yeah, a no man. And what happens here with Cullen is that it reminds me of Paradise Lost, because when especially with the darkness, it's so dark the darkness is visible, and when Satan finds himself in, I see this in literature all the time, when Satan finds himself in the darkness and is talking to Beelzebub next to him and finds that hell is empty and all the devils are here, as Shakespeare says, but he's in pandemonium, all the devils are here. He decides purposefully to pervert and subvert everything in God's creation so that he will eternally heap damnation upon himself with all of his actions henceforth. So that seems to be what Cullen does in the novel. He does this thing we're about to discuss, and from there he is followed by these three almost plagues, and they follow him through this hellish landscape, and they destroy everything that he comes across until he finally sort of meets them. And there's even a flood scene, a kind of a abyssal flood scene that occurs. That's my favorite scene in the book. About
the scene where the river seems to be going backwards.
Yeah. And it's like there's a Stygian blackness, and characters just get lost. They just disappear into the flood. And it almost is like, it's almost like the flood itself, like that, Tubal Cain.
You're not mixing up Child of God and Outer Dark, are you?
Because I don't think so.
Okay.
Is that a Child of God?
I feel like well, there's the flood in Child of God where and Lester Ballard yells at the universe. Lester Ballard yells, "Get!" He tries to yell at the water, "Get!"
Yeah, I might be mixing them up. It's all the same universe anyway.
But no, there is the scene. There's a lot of crossing of rivers, right? Mm-hmm. There's some crossing of rivers here. I think maybe you might.
I think I'm mixing them up. Yeah.
What we have here is you have the pigs, you have the swine.
The pigs, yeah. So you look at my little AI artwork.
Cullen, now contrasting Cullen with we got to do Child of God next. Child of God's so fun. It's not fun for most people, but for guys like us, it's a fun novel. But Cullen's much more of a passive damnation that he enters, right? Like his outer darkness seems to be it's like a renunciation of his will.
Yeah,
he's
I wasn't
wandering.
Yeah.
I
wasn't mixing it up.
He becomes like there's a flood scene.
Yes, there is. Yeah, I was.
Read the quote from, because it's funny, they both parallel each other really well. Both novels are.
Yeah, I was right, because that's how he meets the three guys, because he's on the ferry.
No, I see it. Yep.
Everyone disappears, and he ends up with the three guys at the campfire.
He's crossing the ferry with this guy that shouldn't have crossed at this time. The river's going crazy. He knows you shouldn't go across, and the guy brings him anyways. And he gets.
You like my Crimson Mist arc in front of the moon, and the artwork right there of the pigs flying off of the. I mean, that was extremely biblical, right? The spirits cast into the swine and falling off, and then he falls into the water again.
Right. Let's we go back and how the novel starts, though, right? It's like, so what Cullen has done, his initial sin is infanticide, right? Like there's a child is born to a girl who we find out is his sister. He and his sister are holed up in this little hut in the middle of Appalachian, and he immediately takes the child, brings it out into the woods, and tries to leave it for dead, just like the classic way that in many of the ancient cultures that our ancestors inherited. That's how they would cull a child that was unwanted, and it's insinuated but not overtly stated that the child was a product of the brother and sister. And McCarthy, I think he does that, and he does it tastefully. It's not a McCarthy's very awkward whenever he discusses, whenever he tries to describe sexuality in any of his work, and he rightfully avoids it here. But it is insinuated that the child is a product of Culla, and Rinthi was the name of the sister. What's like the etymology of Rinthi? You look into that?
Yeah, I looked it up. Rinthi is, it said possibly from Ruth, or it's a neologism. I know that home is like is Norse, and there's a lot, and that it's not just thrown in there. My sort. Okay, so let me give my sort of thesis about this book, I guess, because it ties in with this. That if home is Norse for island, and it's kind of it's isolation. My sort of takeaway from the book was kind of like, I imagined that that the first Northmen came to, upper north, got to Vinland, and that you have this group of people who survive and sort of make their way down, and this is like the last guy. This, and it's the same thing in Child of God. It's like we have a guy who is wandering alone in savage wilderness, and he is totally outside of time, and he makes his way down into this sort of mystical place, and this is the culmination of that. This is what happens when you are sort of wandering outside of grace and outside of time. And this would be at a time when he was unchristianized. He's in a place where there seem to be like spiritual furies that exist around him, and everything he does, again, kind of heaps damnation upon himself. And I say that because of the number of Germanic words in the book. The book has almost a linguistic code all of its own, and McCarthy is known for kind of neologisms, and he kind of takes what is apparent in Anglo-Saxon literature, which is the kenning. The kenning, for the folks at home, the kenning is where, you describe the sword as like dragon slayer. You have a 2-word phrase with a dash in the middle, and it becomes representative of the action that it does. And McCarthy takes that and he kind of distills it down into one word. And so we have a bunch of nouns that function as verbs within the sentences in the text. And so everything that they do is action, but it is rife with violence. And so, like, I wanted to read the end of this first chapter when he places the child, because like you just described, you got
to read that whole paragraph, that whole So he takes the child out into the woods. Just
here's the androids. It's the same page. Yeah.
And the sister has no say in this, right? Rinthi has no say in this. Right. Culla's the one. You could tell he feels this great shame about what's coming with the birth. Also, there's a tinker that comes up on him right before the birth happens, and this tinker is dragging around this cart with all sorts of tin items, and it clambers around, and it's described in this is really beautiful prose. So look at some of the words he uses to describe the tinker, and then he chases the tinker off. Then Rinthi gives birth. He grabs the child, who's not named. They call it it. The child is unnamed. It's called the child or it. Its personhood is robbed of this child's personhood is robbed of him before he's even born. And then he tries to run out into the woods. He ends up circling back around, getting lost and disoriented, and in the dark then comes upon what he's probably about to read right now.
Yeah, this is the end of the first chapter, which again the book is kind of the parts you were reading that are italicized kind of function as almost place maps for us. And there's a kind of Anglo-Saxon, and then there's both a kind of Anglo-Saxon and Old Testament sort of lineage that occurs with place maps throughout where we are, which is
Yeah, there's
which is
no
directly
chapters. There's not actual chapters.
right.
It's just the segment will end, and sometimes it starts with this italicized prose that describes usually
Yeah,
the actions of these three, the dark triad, we can call them,
yeah.
that are very similar to. They actually end up being really similar to the the gang at the end of that Flannery O'Connor short story. The A Good Man Is Hard to Find. It's like the misfit in them, but yeah, he. I love this passage here about the.
So I'm gonna read 3 paragraphs here, pretty long. So he leaves the child, and then he leaves the child in the woods. And here's what it says: He did not return along the creek, but took his bearings by what faint light still lay in the west, and struck out across country. The air was dank and stormy. Night fell long and cool through the woods about him, and a spectral quietude set in, as if something were about that crickets and night birds held in dread. He went on faster. With full dark, he was confused in a swampy forest, floundering through sucky quagmires and half running. He did not come upon the river, but upon the creek again, or another creek. He followed it down in full flight now, the trees beginning to close him in, malign and baleful shapes that reared like enormous androids, provoked the alien insubstantiality of this flesh colliding among them. Long after he should have reached the river, he was careering through the woods with his hands outstretched before him against whatever the dark might hold, until he began to stumble and a cold claw was raking upward through his chest. When he came upon the creek again, he splashed into it thigh and crotch before he knew it was there. He stopped, his breath roaring, trying to listen. Very far away, lightning quaked once again soundlessly. The current moved dimly about him. He spat. His saliva bloomed palely on the water and wheeled and slid inexplicably upstream, back the way he'd come. He turned and watched it in disbelief. He plunged his arm into the water. It seemed motionless. He spat again, and again the spittle flared and trembled and listed, perverse. He surged from the water and began to run in the return direction, and at a demented pace through the brush and swamp growth, falling, rising, going on again. All right, this is the last 2 paragraphs. When he crashed into the glade among the cottonwoods, he fell headlong and lay there with his cheek to the earth. And as he lay there, a far crack of lightning went bluely down the sky and bequeathed him in an embryonic bird's first fissured vision of the world, and transpiring instant and outrageous from dark to dark, a final view of the grotto and the shapeless white plasm struggling among the rich and incunabular moss like a lank swamp hare. He would have taken it for some boneless cognate of his heart's dread had the child not cried. It howled execration upon the dim Camarine world of its nativity, wail on wail, while he lay there gibbering with palsied jaw hasps, his hands putting back the night like some witless paraclete beleaguered with all limbo's clamor. God.
Whoa. That's like, I read that like 10 times when I first read this book. I had to read it out loud every time too. That's the thing with McCarthy. You kind of have to read it out loud to really. It reminds you of that. I mean, the ancients used to read everything out loud, right? This whole
it's Homeric. Yeah, it is Homeric.
It's a very new American thing, and I don't know. Some people think it's. I don't know. You almost. I remember when we were kids, and it's like the kids that would move their lips when they read. You're kind of like, oh, like it must be a dummy or something. It's like, no, I think reading out loud is really important for especially for young children learning how to read. I mean, it forms their it makes it's physiological. It formats your nervous system as well when you're actually speaking it out.
Well,
loud.
Literature is meant to be read out loud, and this is Homeric. It's almost like Germanic. Latinate hexameters.
How he uses cognate there. It's so good.
Yeah, and if literature, the lyric comes from the lyre, the instrument, the lyre. So literature is meant to be seen on the page and heard aloud. It's meant to be audible. It's meant to be oracular. And this is an oracular book. It's so tactile, and the character is, I mean, aside from the meaning of what he's saying, which is that he's reduced to a kind of beast wandering around in the dark who's going backwards but forwards.
Well, and then the image at the end there, it's like one of the most horrific images, that image of like of writhing madness. And
Mhm.
I think, you know, I listened to a couple people try to I don't know, I don't like most of the analysis I heard on this on YouTube. I think a lot of people are missing, like, I don't know, I feel like people are missing something when they're reading this novel. And most people tend to think when they read this paragraph, they're thinking that they're thinking the child is gibbering with palsied jaw hasps. No, that's
Mhm.
that's Kulla. Kulla is described as the he. The child is
Yeah.
it. It howled execration upon the dim Camarine world of its nativity, wail on wail, while he lay there gibbering with palsied jaw hasps, his hands putting back the night like some witless paraclete, beleaguered with all limbo's clamor. So that's him in this horrific putting back the night. He's offered here a chance to repent, right? He could take this child and bring it home at this moment,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
He's given this over and over again. The repentance is given to him on a platter. He's offered chances so many times to confess his sins as well,
Mhm.
and he denies it over and
Yeah.
over again. He denies agency. He denies he denies the use of his will for anything other than just aimless wandering, and he
Yeah.
becomes this kind of Cain like character.
He is. It's exactly what he is. He's Cain wandering the earth, wandering around in the darkness again, just heaping sin upon himself. And it is described the difference between McCarthy and other, Southern Gothic writers tend to have certainly a spiritual element and a kind of mystical darkness that surrounds them in ambiance, but McCarthy's writing, the speaker in the McCarthy um, narratives always gives this overt instance of where we have somebody described as an acolyte, a paraclete, a uh,
Supplicant, yeah.
a supplicant, and I mean, look at the end of the next chapter. Setting forth in the faint moonlight, the tinker. We get to the tinker. We'll come back to the tinker. The tinker now at her elbow, and her carrying the child wrapped completely from sight. They appeared furtive, clandestine, stepping softly and soft. Their voices over the sandy road in shadows so foreshortened they seemed sprung and frenzied with a violence in which their creators moved with dreamy disconcern. We always have this instance of creation and destruction that occurs within the narrative, and I think that the other thing here is that McCarthy is really known for, when you look at his paragraphs, we have they're rife with sentence fragments, and the sentence fragment is something that usually I think it bothers me and other readers or other writers in other literature. It has to be earned, but here we get the impression that the sentences are fragmentary because the thoughts are fragmentary and the world is fragmentary. So they're missing the whole. They have parts of it, but they are missing the whole. And really, the only characters in this that are complete are the three plagues, the three furies that occur here.
Yeah, the
There's
like dark, the demonic triad. Yeah,
That's
they
right.
well, they're partially complete, but remember, one of them is nameless, one of them is named, and
Yeah,
the main guy is nameless as well. But
but they are
he's the
whole in
bearded
their
one.
namelessness. They
Uh
they
huh.
are they are fully formed in their namelessness. We have one guy who's named and the others who aren't, and they are existing in a place where they are absolutely meant to be in the narrative.
Yeah,
So they know
they're not.
exactly.
These are not guys who are about to repent. Like they're kind of
Right.
just purely demonic,
Yeah.
and they behave in an almost ethereal way, and they seem
Mhm.
to they've embraced they've embraced the kind of like the process of demonosis so much, this inversion of theosis, um, to such an extent that they're just completely swallowed up in that
I mean,
darkness.
are they are they real? Are they ethereal? Or are
Yeah, I think that's
they
the closest thing
substantial?
to a possible non-physical, like they're the closest thing to a possible pure demon that McCarthy has written.
Yeah.
Like more so than Anton Chigurh, more so than the Judge. Even I
Mhm.
think, well, the Judge, you could see the seeds of the Judge within the leader of this group.
Mhm.
You could see the Judge and Anton Chigurh as well, and the aunt. What's the aunt's name? And all the pretty horses. Who's she? The Judge is is something. He was such a grand character, and he seems to be in seed form in so many of
the part
these
I
other
like
films.
the most in No Country for Old Men is that Anton Chigurh is just this agent of death. He's just like a sort of walking Grim Reaper, but he's
Like a
kind
spiritual phoenix
of
program.
yes, yeah, he's an MK Delta, and he's walking around, but the only person that he comes across that is an equal to him and that seems to scare him, at least in the film, is when he goes to the motel and that big globular woman is running the motel. Do you remember that woman? This big lady, and he says, I want to, tell me where the room is. And she says, are
Can't
you
do that.
not listening to me? Maybe you ain't heard me. We don't have no rooms available. And he kind of looks at her and then walks backwards out of the room like he's come up against some sort of
The only
angelic
one who
spirit.
really puts him in his place.
Yes.
If only he got to meet Carla Jean's mom, grandma though. If only he got to meet grandmama. I got the cancer. This man's trying to take my soul. I ain't calling your coin.
He goes, he's a psychopathic maniac, but I can handle him.
When the Mexican comes up and like helps her with her bag, she's like, "Thank you very much." It's like yes, no problem.
Call it. Well, I need to know what I'm calling for.
She's so good. She's the lady. She's in Donnie Darko as well. It's the only other thing I remember her in.
Yeah,
I'm sure she's in some stuff.
Yeah.
She plays the old Karen lady in Donnie Darko.
She plays the G-Max character in that. She's the one hustling. She's the one hustling for the Patrick Swayze McEpstein in Donnie Darko.
It's funny, Donnie Darko in tone is kind of almost similar to Outer Dark, but Donnie Darko is kind of more actually Gnostic and very, very postmodern. But the feeling of like something really bad is about to happen permeates the novel. But after the horrific scene with the palsy jaw hasps, there's not that much that's really awful happening. It's more subtle sins that Cullen engages in. He steals some boots from an employer and runs off. He what else does he do? He allows. Well, I don't want to. The pig scene is actually pretty amazing, but his lack of help and of care for other characters around him also becomes a pretty egregious sin when he could have helped and could have saved the man's life, and he just lets him fall off into the darkness with pigs.
Yeah. So he drops the baby off and then he's gone. And then the sister mother wakes up and she doesn't have her baby. And the tinker has come around. The tinker is described as a gnomic character who walks around selling pornography, but comes across this baby. And
that's a great scene, by the way. Like that scene is that scene is so good when he's talking to Culla and he's offering him goods and he's like, you seen one of these? And he pulls out like a little nudie magazine or something, and he's like, what does he say? Can you scry? Can you scry? He's like, no, it don't matter. It got pictures, and it spells pictures like Pithers. It's a brilliant scene.
He's like, yeah, I've seen it. I've seen my sister. No, he is nasty. The gnomic tinker comes around in a very Oedipal scene, and saves the baby, or like saving Moses among the reeds, and takes the baby away. And then the baby is gone for most of the book. And now we have the sister who is wandering around looking for the child, and we have the brother who's wandering around looking for the sister. And everywhere that they go, they are met with various sort of archetypes along a kind of Homeric Odyssey. So they are continuously met with offers of a place to stay or a place to work. They take them, they don't take them. The brother has all these places to work. He steals, he doesn't. And everywhere that he ends up, he is accused of crimes. But what's interesting is that the crime that he's really done is far worse than the crimes that he's being accused of. And there
And
are
he's often
people
falsely accused. That's
That's
another
right.
interesting
Yeah,
aspect.
and there are people in this that are actually doing the things that he is doing or will do later, but he's not doing it at the time. So it's a kind of equivocational narrative where you almost get tricked into like wanting him to succeed or to want to get to some end to his journey because he's a character that you're following, but you can't forget what he's done at the beginning of this. And so then you have
That's what's
these
so brilliant about McCarthy too. He's like, you could follow this character, and he's not. He doesn't make you empathize with him too much. You feel sorry for him, but at no point are you just like, oh yeah, I really want this guy to win, because there's nothing to win. You keep hoping he repents. You keep hoping he does something right, but it's just this is not going to happen at this point.
It's also
this guy is not going to change.
It's interesting also that Renthi is the one who continuously calls upon the name of the Lord in this. She's continuously saying Lord, which is just a part of her sort of conversation, but she still continues to say Lord in this, as if she is low down and she's looking for outside help. She's also
she embodies his innocence, right? Whereas like we don't know. I mean, we don't know the soul of either one. We don't know what's really inside of either one of these characters. You get a good idea that the narrative seems to portray that what you're seeing is an emptying out of the soul and personhood in a guy like Kulla. You're seeing his loss of humanity, his loss of humanness, whereas Renthi is super innocent. It doesn't explicitly say that she was. I mean, she's clearly been abused, right?
Yeah.
We're not sure what happened was consensual with her. She has this kind of childlike wonder about her as well. And she just wants her to find her baby. She's like, I'm looking for a chap. I'm trying to find this chap. She calls him a chap, and she just wants to find her baby. And she's a physically even like her. I like how her kind of like the homing beacon in No Country for Old Men, searching for the money.
Yeah,
her body is expressing milk, and she knows the baby's alive because she herself has this physical and spiritual and biological even connection to the child, and it'll just describe kind of the stains on her, or the darkening spots on her blouse, the darkening spots on her dress, because she never got to nurse the child. The child never had the mother's milk one time. It was immediately taken from her. It had no,
which is both an extremely, is both an uplifting image and also horrible at the same time in this, that she's capable of, she wants to mother this child that's gone. And at the same time that she's got this horrible affliction of not being able to find her child. And everywhere she goes, people sort of don't believe her. She meets with the doctor, and the doctor's like, that's impossible. It can't happen. But they live in the impossible. There's a section of a lot of these books remind me of the poet Rimbaud's book, A Season in Hell, where there's this kind of Gnostic dark gospel that occurs in the prose poem. And that's sort of the region where she's found herself, in this like lightning zone full of darkness. And she is crying out for something to save her child, but she is just incapable of finding it, because everyone she comes across is also an archetype in this sort of zone. And I marked all the times in the book where, I mean, for instance, on page 63, she's described as a dark votive. There's a ring of light. She's a lone acolyte. Had she not had the lamp, she could have seen him where he stood in the deeper shadow of the eaves watching her. There's the processional. And yet the woman had started turning back, and now she stopped at the door, eyes squinting and oblique to the light, half-mast and narrow as a cat. It's almost like everyone is, what is a cat? Is a cat diurnal, or is that a human? I can't remember. Is diurnal what a cat is? They see best at dusk and dawn and dusk. Yeah, so she's, nothing is ever clear. It's never clear unless it's sort of in the half light, and everyone has this kind of a kind of beast around her. She, on page 60, the man reached and turned down the lamp until the flame showed but crosswise in the wick slot, a dull bronze heat quaking deep in the glass toward which their faces seemed to lean disembodied in a perimeter of smoking icons. Right? There's a dark zone they have to make their way through, and all the language in the prose takes on this this kind of alliterative tactility. Is that a word? The woman regarded her above a poised and dripping fowl of fat meat.
One word, fat meat.
Yeah. I marked every time in this book where shadows occur.
Well, it's like
The
every
book
page.
is
I mean, every
yeah, it's almost every page.
but you know what I like?
Every page.
Read some of the passages. Get some of those passages out. I want to. And I have something to add about the shadow symbolism here too. Something interesting he does.
Let's see. On page 32, that's one of the first ones here. He says, hold on page 32, says, well, first it says, certainly it could have held a grown man, this piece of ground gutted and strewn with mulch, slug white roots upturned to the disastrous light. There's a lot of Macbeth in this also. I mean,
Exactly.
it begins, it has the three, instead of three weird sisters, the fates, it has these men in it. But oftentimes in Shakespeare, darkness is described as a wan light, which is like a pale whiteness. It's not pure white or full of light. It's like the whiteness of death. And it says, his long shadow overrode her, but she did not see it. She stood and found herself against his chest. She screamed and fell back, stumbled to the ground, crushing the flowers, the blood starting again, warm on her leg. But he was the one, kneeling in the dark earth with his writhing face, howling at her, saying, now you done it. Now you really went and done it. And her own face still bland and impervious in such wonder, he mistook her accusation, silent and inarguable female invective, until he rose and fled, bearing his clenched hands above him, threatful, supplicant to the mute and windy heavens.
So that scene, by the way, that's a great scene, and it's after she wants this child, and she knows that she knows what he's done.
Mm-hmm.
Now she doesn't seem to be crushed. She doesn't seem to give much pushback on his actions here, but then she obviously does regret it. You can tell later she just wants the baby, and she goes out into the woods and she asks him, she's like, Culla, where'd you put the baby? I want to go out to the spot. And he tells her, well, I buried it. I put it out in the woods. He didn't actually bury it. What he did is he set it out in the woods, cowardice. He ran away in cowardice and then ran in a circle on accident, came back upon it, was given a chance to repent and bring the baby back, and then just left again. Right. He left it there. And the tinker ends up finding the baby. The tinker finds the baby, takes the baby, and then we don't really know what happened to the child until near the very end of the novel. Yeah. Tinker takes the baby, and then she goes, and there's this conversation she has with Culla. What page was that on that you were just?
I was 32.
32. So yeah, the conversation she has, it's such a beautiful, it's so beautifully written here, where she's asking him where he buried it. And she says, Culla, he went past her and put a bucket on the table. She had her hand to her mouth, watching him with huge eyes. He put the dipper in the pail and took a drink. He wiped his mouth and looked at her. Culla, what, damn it? I just wanted to ask where it's at. And it's asked, A-S-T, the way he does the local dialect. He winced and his eyes went narrow. What do you mean? He said. Her hands worked nervously. I just wanted to know where it was you put him. In the ground. Well, she said, I just thought maybe if you was to show me where at, I could see it and maybe put some flowers or something. Flowers, he said. It ain't even got a name. She was twisting her hands again, and he came from the table where he had been leaning and started past her. Culla. He stopped the door and looked at her. She hadn't even looked around. We could give it one, she said. It's dead, he said. You don't name things dead. She turned slowly. It wouldn't hurt nothing, she said. Damn you, he said. The flowers, if you want, I'll show you. So then they go out to the spot where he supposedly buried it, and she sees this spot, and she starts trying to dig up the mulched ground where she could see that he kind of had dug up the ground. Well, she discovers she not dug but a few inches before she came upon packed clay, unsevered roots. She chose another spot and soon uncovered a bedded rock which bared to the oblique light fall of the sun's retrograde, lay scored with powdery axe marks. So she sees that he started hitting rock, and he just gave up, and he threw a little dirt on top of it. And it's like, I'll tell her I buried it here. That's the laziness of Culla, the lack of skill, the lack of forethought, and the stupidity. This is something that Cormac's that is something that Cormac puts a lot in his books. He does seem to he likes skilled people. He likes people who have built their skill, kind of like the parable of the talents, right? Like, he abhors Culla for his lack of a trade. Culla's consistently asked if he has a trade. No, I ain't got a trade. I can paint your roof or something. It's like and this is one of the reasons why he's so pathetic to, seemingly to the author, is because he doesn't even care to make himself good at anything. He has no will, doesn't use his life for anything.
Well, you wonder what these characters, the great novels, films do this too, where the great novels almost make it seem like we're privy to something that we're like, there's some favor we're being given in seeing the scene, or we're not supposed to see it. So it's like they're living their life, and the great books and novels make it like they were already living, and they lived a whole life up to this point, and now is where we start the story, and now we see them, and then after we're gone, they're going to continue. And you wonder what these people were doing all this time. And I think that's one of the things about the novel, is that, like you said, that they're just existing in this place, and everybody else sort of either has a trade, or they're faking like they have a trade, or they're grifting, or they're all these different. I mean, the tinker even has a trade. I mean, he's
right,
he's
and the
going
tinker's
around.
trade is he's not a noble character at all.
Right.
He's a tortured soul. Like he gives this great speech. I'm sure you got it marked in there. He gives this beautiful, like, it's a horrible speech as far as the content of it. It's so retching and tragic. But he's full of rage. But he rides around and sells his tin pans and sells his trinkets and maybe picks up a baby in the woods every once in a while and goes and sells it to somebody. That's a great speech.
That is a great speech, because it's that. We'll get to that, but that's one of the only speeches in this where we have a character who's almost speaking for the audience, for the reader, because you want to scream at some of these people, especially Culla, who you want to know why he's done what he's done. What is it? Why would you do that? Why did you do the events that led you to this in the first place? What is? It's past what is wrong with you. They live in this total devilish darkness where he's done this thing to his sister, and you just want to scream. You want to, like, when is justice going to come to this guy? What's going to be the retribution? Where's the reckoning? And the great scene with the tinker is that he kind of speaks for us in that instance. That what do you mean? He says, about suffering. What would you know about it? And it shows that the characters are not living in isolation. They're not actually totally alienated from each other. They do live in a world where each has their own suffering, but they are in the same world. I saw on page 47, there's another instance of darkness. I was just going to go to that real quick, because that ties in with page 32 that I just read. And I wrote at the top that shadows are like the psychic self or the shade, and seems to lengthen and split. So this page says, no, I ain't married. He looked up at the squire. Their shadows canted upon the whitewashed brick of the kitchen shed in a pantomime of static violence, in which the squire reeled backward, and he leaned upon him in headlong assault. It ain't no crime to be poor, he said. No, it ain't. It ain't a crime. I hope you've got a good family. It's a sacred thing, a family, a sacred obligation afore God. The squire began looking away now, and he moved to home again. It ain't no crime to be poor, he said. That's right. But shiftlessness is a sin. I would judge, wouldn't you? That's exactly what you were just talking about. Shiftlessness. No.
Well, keep going though. Keep reading.
No trade. He says, I reckon. He said, yes, the Bible reckons. What I got, I earned. There's not a man in this county will tell you different. I've never known nothing but hard work. I've been many a time in the field at daybreak waiting for the sun to come up to commence work, and I was there when it went down again. Daybreak to backbreak for a God-given dollar. There ain't a man in this county will dispute it. And home was looking down, one hand crossed over the back of the other, the way men stand in church. There was a commotion of hens from beyond the yard, a hog squeal ceasing again in the tranquility of bird calls and cicadas. And then I'm going to skip right here. After he had washed, he sat in the shade of a tool shed and pared idly at the sole of his shoe with the knife he carried. He watched the soft O cross from the barn to the house. In a few minutes, he came from the kitchen door and returned across the yard again, a small figure scuttling from shadow to shadow with laborious ill grace, carrying in one hand the squire's boots and disappearing into the barn. And on the next page, it says, his face already shining with grease or sweat, whatever it was, like wet obsidian.
Yeah. Well, we returned to Obsidian a few books later. We know Obsidian in the road. I mean, she did it with a piece of obsidian. What was that line about? Like he showed her how to do it. The point of it in atom thick or something like that. That was he.
The next chapter again. We get this is where we get the Furies. We get the ragged phalanx. Anthroparian and the driver rising in remonstration from the wagon box so that when the next one came up behind him sideways in a sort of dance and swung the brush hook, it missed his neck and took him in the small of the back, severing his spine. And when he fell unhinged sideways and without a cry. This is where we get these sort of intra-chapter, I don't know, what would you call these lyrics on violence? Because this is where the plague men, the dark triad.
What page is that on?
That is page 51.
And it came across so these guys are kind of following around Kola.
Yeah.
Right. They're kind of haunting Kola, and they end up killing people around him. They don't end up killing him. It's like this strange, Kola's like marked like Cain, and maybe the people he comes in contact with are even brought to these grim ends. But there's something about Kola himself is spared of violent death, right?
Mm-hmm.
And his curse is not you're going to die a violent death. You're going to feel a lot of pain when you die. I mean, his curse is like he's damned to walk the earth alone. He's damned to walk the earth being and the ground is crying out with his brother's blood. It's like he is a Cain character. He's not a Job. He's not a Jonah. He's a Cain.
No, he's not a man suffering for righteousness. He's not a man suffering for grace, or suffering because because he is
he constantly denies the grace, right? Like I love that the first chapter, the grace is given. Like there's this merciful thing that happens when he's horrified. He's running through the woods. He comes back upon the baby. All you got to do is pick it up, bring it back home. Like he's offered repentance so much.
Well, I think that if Job is suffering, there's the part in Job where God tells Job, who do you think you are? Were you here at the creation of the world? Were you here when I set the planets in motion? And so Job is learning that we learn from Job that God is great and infinite, and that we are human beings and we're finite, and that our suffering is in God's time is different from ours. This guy is condemned to walk, and he's followed, but everyone he comes across gets slaughtered by these spirits following him, and it's purposeful. It seems to show that if sin is death and separation, then he continues to bring this on himself just by his very movements. Everything he does after he's committed these sort of primal sins, first with the incest, and then infanticide. I mean, it's
like the worst sins you could think of, right? I mean, it's like
the worst. Yeah. So everything he does.
Speaking of Job, I was just thinking about the line in the road where it's like the wife is arguing with these flashback scenes in the road where the man is arguing with the wife. The wife directly quotes the wife of Job, which she says, "Curse God and die." Right. So that death here. It's interesting how McCarthy his use of death as a symbol, as not just as a symbol, right, but as the ontology per se of death in his books. he changes it and he works with it in so many different ways throughout all his novels. I think that's something that's real brilliant about his and I haven't read his whole catalog of books, but most of what I've read from him, everyone is so distinct, but he still uses, like The Road uses so much of the shadow, the dark, the obsidian, a lot of the same words, a lot of the same prose style. Even The Road is much more distilled and more almost Hemingway, like it's more simple prose, most of it. And but I love the way that he morphs and changes and works with these symbols throughout all his works.
Yeah, it's I think that he is, I mean, he's quite, it's Miltonian and Homeric, but it's also Shakespearean in how he shows us things. He's telling us a story, but he doesn't tell us events. He shows us through his diction and through his syllabic choices. Like he shows us through the way that the words sound. And what's interesting is that C.S. Lewis, I said this recently, I don't remember what stream it was, but C.S. Lewis said that the difference between T.S. Eliot's Wasteland and Dante's Inferno is that T.S. Eliot takes us through a wasteland, but it is a wasteland. It's a wasteland to get through the wasteland. It's a slog. Whereas Dante takes us through the Inferno, but it's beautiful. There's a glittering, it almost glitters in its darkness. There's a terrible beauty that occurs when he takes us through it. And I think that McCarthy is somewhere in the latter, because his word choice is such that he doesn't need to describe things to us. He shows us what they are in their purest form. At the end on page 77, we get the Furies. Again, there's this great paragraph. Often he will book in. He'll chapter end, or he'll intersperse things with this incredible violence in paragraphs. And I think this is an incredibly violent paragraph, which without much violence. It says, "It was late afternoon when they set forth again out from the town, the wheels rasping in the sand back down the yellow road. Night fell upon them dark and star blown, and the wagon grew swollen near mute with dew. On their chairs in such black immobility, these travelers could have been stone figures quarried from the architecture of an older time." They're almost like living animate idols. Just totally like almost like Nordic and
that describes kind of the space that this novel seems to fill, right? Like it seems to be outside of time. It's not dated, but it's, I mean, it's kind of a timeless story. That's why I said it's more parable than it is your traditional novel. It's like and it's not that long too. I mean, I'd say it's one of the quicker reads of McCarthy. It's not, I mean, Child of God's quicker read, but it's, I guess, over 200 pages. What is it? 250 pages or so?
Yeah.
240 something. Not too long.
I want to take us through a couple of things here. I'm going to skip forward to some sort of key passages, and I'm going to sort of we'll culminate in, I want to talk about the flood that occurs, and then the river journey, and then finally with the Tinker and that scene with the Tinker.
We've got to go through the swine scene too, as well.
Yes, and the swine scene is great. Yeah. So on page 96, on page 97 at the start of the new chapter, here we get I like the way that he changes up his narrative technique. So now we have once upon a time, once in the night, she heard a horse coming along over the country road, a burning horse beneath the dead moonlight that trailed a wake of pale and drifting dust. Moving on to the next paragraph. She slept through the
dust
first
is another one of those. You talk about shadow. Dust is everywhere in this film.
Yes.
From dust you came, and to dust you'll return. The dust is all over the place.
She slept through the first wan auguries of dawn, gently washed with river fog, while martins came and went among the arches. Slept into the first heat of the day and woke to see toy birds with sesame eyes regarding her from their clay nests overhead. She rose and went to the river and washed her face and dried it with her hair. When she gathered up dried it with her hair is amazing. When she gathered up the bundle of her belongings, that's in my book. Drying up her hair is in my book. I just remembered that. Buy my book, everyone. Runes. There's a there is a poem that I added in the very late stages of the book called Centurion, where I think I got this from Tacitus, and it talks about when one of the emperors was coming through, and there was a woman, a beautiful woman, standing at a fountain, washing her hair and drying her face with her hair. It says down at the bottom of this page, emaciate and blinking, and with the wind among her rags, she looked like something replevied by grim miracle from the ground and sent with tattered windings and halt corporeality into the agony of sunlight.
What replevied? What
that means recovered.
Replevied. So levy. Yes. I mean, just levy.
Yeah, seized. It's levied like goods.
Yeah,
like seized.
That's amazing.
Seized goods.
What are the? That's not a Germanic word. That's Latin, right?
Yeah, I think that's a Latinate word. But
anyway, sorry. This is another one of those words where you got to look up words every once in a while in this book, and in all McCarthy, it's part of the fun of reading him. Actually, is the weird words you'll learn in there.
Yeah, the next page on page 98. In the middle of that paragraph, she approached, wary of dogs, up a walkway past rank growths of bee balm and phlox, terraced with fieldstone, past latticed morning glories, strung against the blinding white clapboards, bonneted and bent to the black earth, a woman with a trowel, a small cairn of stones, and a paper of plants beside her. The cairn is certainly Gaelic. And then moving on to the next page 100. If crows had not risen from a field, she might never have looked that way to see two hanged men in a tree like gross chimes. She stood for a moment watching them, clutching the bundle of clothes, wondering at such dark work in the noon of day while all about sang summer birds. She went on, walking softly. Once she looked back, nothing moved in that bleak tree. That's, of course, foreshadowing for the end of the book. But I'm sure that theses have been written on Masonic elements in McCarthy or tarot elements. There's certainly I think you asked me about the astrological elements in McCarthy. He certainly talks about stars. Not in a.
Usually when he's in those zoom out moments where it's like, he does this kind of cosmic zoom out every once in a while, describing landscape. But I think it's only like 3 or 4 times that he mentions. He'll just mention a constellation. It'll be like under the water serpent that happens in this book.
That's right.
I think.
Yeah.
And then I think Cassiopeia spinning, or I think in The Crossing about like Cassiopeia spinning around the pole star. He used to, when McCarthy was real young, I forget where I read this. I read somewhere when he was really young, he was kind of like a runaway. Like he kind of like ran away from home, was just living out in the boonies in Appalachia. And I guess
out in Rhode Island. He was born in Rhode Island one day.
Yeah. Okay. So they made his way down to like Knoxville and stuff. He used to like just sleep out in the woods and watch the stars all night. So he was a stargazer. I don't know if anybody would be able to write a thesis about Masonic stuff. I think Masonic stuff is pretty sparse, and he even seems to be a little bit. Masonry is mentioned in Blood Meridian, but as far as like, I thought we were going to cut ourselves and bleed into it like the Masons or something. So it's mentioned in a derogatory way. Yeah. And then the judge talks about the Masons that built this, that build out of stone. But I don't think there's a lot of.
I'm sure there's a thesis that's been written on intertextual, feministic, misogynistic, fascist.
I'm just thinking of like a conspiracy, like somebody's gonna like there's Masonic imagery all throughout McCarthy. I don't think you could even you're not gonna even make like a good 2010 conspiracy candy video about Masonry throughout. It's like there's a few references, but it's mostly in passing. And
let the brother receive the light. He's walking through the darkness into the light. So I don't know.
Oh, the darkness, bro. Light. There's like black and white. He's the way.
That's right.
Masons wear clothes too, bro. So like they wear supplicants. That's Masonry, dude.
That's right. That's right. The trowel. He mentioned a trowel earlier.
Yeah. Buildings. People live in buildings, bro. He lives in a house. Who built that? Masons. Oh, you catch
uh,
that the classic like Protestant conversation where Renthi goes to this old woman's house and it gives this beautiful. There's great prose describing this woman's home and the brood. What does it say? Moss and lichen and where it goes. The road went in deep woods and constant damp, and the house was grown with a rich velour of moss and lichen and brooded in a palpable miasma of rot. Chickens had so scratched the soil from the yard that knobs and knees of tree roots stood everywhere in grotesque configuration, up out of the earth like some gathering of the mad, laid suddenly bare in all their writhing attitudes of pain. She waited. It was an old woman spoke to her. I've not been a hoeing. This here is just to kill snakes with. She nodded. I don't ask nobody say so for what all I do, but I'd not have you think I'd be a hoeing. Yeah, she said. Yes, she said. I don't hold with breaking the Sabbath and don't care to associate with them that does. It ain't Sunday, she said. It's what? It ain't Sunday today, she said. The old woman peered at her strangely. I don't believe you been saved, have ye? She said. I don't know. Ah, the old woman said. One of them. She tamped down a small piece of earth with the flat of the hoe. So it's interesting, kind of like Calvinist little old lady in the woods, and Renty's asked if she's saved, and she's like, I don't know. And the woman's like, I don't know if you're saved.
yeah.
sounds like Twitter.
He should have saved her. She should have saved her.
Somebody should have told her. Someone should have told her she's saved.
That's right. Somebody should have told her. And that reminds me of the scene in Child of God. It's my favorite chapter in Child of God, where he meets the guy trying to teach him how to make the axe.
Yes.
And he's telling him about the axe handle, and he's like, and then what you got to do is you got to put it in here so it's not too hot and it's not too cold. Then you temper it like this. It goes on for 4 pages,
like 3 pages of just describing how to. He
goes, you want to try? And then the guy goes, try what? It's like,
you think you could do it on your own?
What do you mean? Try what? The thing I just fucking told you. Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like Lester Ballard is a lot like Color, right? Lester has no desire to learn anything new. He just does what he does, and he doesn't. He's got no will except to. Well, he just wants to fulfill his own lusts.
Yeah, the snake. Well, you were talking about, and then there's like
the snake. Yeah, the
snake handler. Yeah,
snake.
Yeah. You said the old man, I wouldn't turn Satan away for a drink.
Now we're just gonna jump straight to Child of God and do another 3 hours now, or
what? Okay, here's I'm turning to page 129. This is where the minister gets stabbed by the dark. I wrote dark triune or dark triad. Okay, so it says, let me put on my glasses. The 2 hounds rose howling. Okay, start over. Take 2. The 2 hounds rose howling from the porch with boar's hackles and walled eyes and descended into the outer dark. Hey, that's the title, says Peter. Whoa. The old man took up a shotgun and peered out through the warped glass of his small window. 3 men mounted the steps and 1 tapped at the door. And who is there? A minister. Pale lamplight falling down the door, the smiling face, black beard, the tautly drawn and dusty suit of black. Light went in a long, bright wink upon the knife blade as it sank with a faint breath of gas into his belly. He felt suddenly very cold. The dogs had gone, and there was no sound in the night anywhere. Minister? B said, Minister? His assassin smiled upon him with bright teeth, the faces of the other 2 peering from either shoulder in consubstantial monstrosity, a grim triune that watched wordless, affable. He looked down at the man's fist cupped against his stomach. The fist rose in an eruption of severed viscera until the blade seized in the junction of his breastbone, and he stood disemboweled. He reached to put 1 hand on the door jamb. He took a step backwards as if to let them pass.
What page is that on? What page?
Page 129.
So we've got a consubstantial triune. Yeah. So I mean, you're clearly using the Trinitarian language to describe this inverse Trinity of men. And he actually, you could tell McCarthy. I mean, he grew up like Roman Catholic, so you could tell he's familiar with this language. He's using that very intentionally. The word consubstantial is hearkened to at the very first paragraph of the book, where it talks about them. They crested. I've been wanting to ask you about this first sentence. So they crested out on the bluff in the late afternoon with their shadows long in the sawgrass and burnt sedge, moving single file and slowly high above the river, and with something of its own implacability. So there's something weird that happens there because it's talking about they. They are the subject of this sentence. There's no comma, there's some conjunctions there, but and burnt sedge, moving single file and slowly high above the river, and with something of its own implacability, pausing and grouping for a moment and going on out again, strung out in silhouette against the sun, and then dropping under the crest of the hill. So suddenly it turns to a singular subject, its own implacability.
Yeah, that's the movement. Yeah.
Okay, so the movement, I always try to figure out, is it describing their movement, but it describes them as being three and then being one also. So they're like, they're in single file. They moved in shadow all together, which suited them very well.
Well, so I think this is where what I mentioned earlier, that when he makes nouns into verbs, and not gerunds, but he gives an action of movement, like a kind of tactile movement, even to place names or to people. And one thing that reminds me of with the single file is they sort of seem like dark supplicants, but also it reminds me of, I remember one criticism of when Saving Private Ryan came out. And I remember that there was this, I read this review by this old man who was in World War II. And he said, there's a great scene in Saving Private Ryan where after they've landed on the beach and after they're coming, overland in France, there's a silhouette where the bombs are going off in the background. There's artillery fire, and we see the crest of a hill, and we see the guys walking over the hill, the company. But the guy was like, that would never happen. That would never happen like that, because when you see them lined up, they're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the top of a hill coming over. They'd be lined up single file because you can't tell how many people there were. And if there's a German position, they would just machine gun the top of the hill. So it reminds me of this, because we have these three guys who look like one person walking, but it's actually three people, like you were saying, a dark triad, and the very movement itself signifies what they are. They're constantly moving. They are moving in the name of action here, and their whole raison d'etre is following this guy around, and the worst, the action. Okay, so one of the things I covered recently was this is speaking of like modernism and postmodernism, just a little tangent here. There's a French theorist named Antonin Artaud who wrote this book called The Theater and Its Double. He was a sometime actor. He got kicked out of the Surrealists, and he ended up toothless and insane and on morphine and all this stuff. But in his book, The Theater and Its Double, there's theater of cruelty and the theater of blood. And when he talks about art, and this makes sense now, it didn't make sense then, but he says that it's one thing to have an avant-garde piece of theater where, like, oh, we're gonna be Marat Sade, and we're talking about the Marquis de Sade, and the audience will be they'll be participating in the play, and there's like no difference between the stage and the audience, and they thought that was very avant-garde. He said that's not enough. The real avant-garde, the real theater is the theater of blood, where the people are in the play and they don't know they're in the play. So when people are killed in the play, it's them. They are the ones killed. And he said that the only meaning, this is real satanic shit. He said the only meaning in the world really is violence. He said that, and that's a real Judge Holden thing.
The judge, right?
Yeah, that his God is war. Yeah, and so. And this is kind of what these Furies, man. Absolutely, that's what the Furies sort of this dark triad represents. That they're
kind of like violence. A proto judge. Like really, the judge is kind of like an extension of these guys to a certain extent. The language there is so. I mean, it's really brilliant. That whole page. What is the faces of the other two peering from either shoulder in consubstantial monstrosity, a grim triune that watched wordless, affable. So it's like wordless also. I mean, you're calling to mind the word of God, right? It's a wordless triune. They're consubstantial in monstrosity, a grim triune. Later when they actually have the conversation near the end, which one of the longer conversations in the novel, you find out that one of them is named, and his name is like Harmon. The bearded man is unnamed, and the other guy is just intentionally not named. So there's this interesting idea of personhood being explored in their triune as well. The lack of agency, and the bearded man, being the head of them, is essentially giving orders, and his actions, his will is being done through these other members of the Dark Trinity. So it's a very they're trying to ape God in certain ways, and wreak havoc on the world about them.
So wordless, I mean, if in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and we have the beginning of the book starting with a child who has no name, then it makes
the beginning
sense.
of the book is first we see that the nameless the black triune, the dark triad, the monster.
We have a dark triad. We have a dark triad, like a dark magi, right? Coming to visit upon the birth of this child, but the child has no name, and they have no name, and no one. And there may be a name, but the name seems to be too terrible, and it all exists in this kind of inverted nativity that occurs.
You remember in The Crossing, there's the big theme with the story of the ex-priest talking about the names of things, and
that's right.
I forget exactly what he says, but it's a theme throughout McCarthy, and trying to explore the meaning of language, and how language seems to be kind of destructive in the world of McCarthy to a certain extent, right? Like the naming of something is almost an act of violence, especially if it's named incorrectly. And naming something is important. It can be something beautiful as well in McCarthy, but it's like thinking about the road where the child has no name. He's just he's the boy, the man and the boy, Papa.
That's right.
The child calls him Papa. He ends up dying. So I think there's something that McCarthy has these ideas of language being some sort of. I think he hates language as much as he loves it, because he knows it limits. It's something that does divide, and you need it you need language, but at the same time it's inadequate at really getting down to the core of certain describing.
Well, it's like that one part where it talked about standing in the dark gibbering, without names, without being given dominion over the beasts, and without our names ourselves. God knows our name. He knows who we are. And without that, they're just sort of rolling around in the dark, gibbering and gnashing their teeth. And that seems to be one of the things it seems such a simple thing, language and saying words and having a name, but it's a core. It's core to existence, and so I guess the question is, how far will this go? What will be the result of it? And
you like how when Rinthi is feeling this desire for the child and to get closure, she even tries to name it, and then Cola denies her that. He says, "Well, we can name it. It ain't even got a name. Why are you gonna give it flowers?" And she's like, "Well, we could give it a name." And he hates when he hears this, right? Like this sends him into almost a rage. He becomes menacing. So the evil here wants to stamp out personhood, wants to stamp out identity. And of course, the dark triad being nameless in this book is kind of this almost the demons want to kill, steal, and destroy and remove
that part. I think it's a True Detective where Matthew McConaughey's like, everybody's looking for meaning, but all we are is just scratching around looking for our place in the dirt.
Time is a flat circle.
So, all right, let's move on to page 131. I'm just gonna, we can take it through this. Page 131. He says he kept walking. This is back to Cullen. He kept walking after the sun was down. There were no more houses. Later, a moon came up, and the road before him went winding chalky and vaporous through the black woods. Swamp peepers hushed constantly before him and commenced behind him as if he moved in a void claustral to sound. He carried a stick with him and prodded each small prone shadow through which he passed, but this road held only shapes of things. No names. It's just shapes and darkness.
This is what, and I'll say this so I don't forget it. There's this thing that he does in Outer Dark. It's not platonic. It's like a
Yeah, I know what you mean.
refutation and an inverse Platonism where the world of forms and shapes, and this is also in The Crossing. I'm only halfway through The Crossing, so nobody spoil the rest of it for me. It's brilliant so far. But there's this inversion and this refutation of Platonism where the world of forms and darkness and shadows in the cave is somewhere you go to hide from the light of revelation. It's somewhere, it's something that's not, there's not the Platonic realm of the forms is not something at least in this some of these works from McCarthy, it's not something that's higher and more true. It's something that's lower and debased and devoid of the personhood and devoid of grace and devoid of light. So I could be wrong there, but that's my thesis is that
I remember that
inverse Platonic thing.
Yeah, I remember reading it, and there are, especially there's a thing in Child of God with that, right, where he goes, I mean, there's what seems like it's going to be a Platonic cave that he goes into where he's buried these masticated figures of, these souls that are sitting there in supplication, but it ends up being the opposite, like you were saying, that the entire world is sort of inverted. He's gone into a kind of,
he goes reverse into the cave.
Yeah. That's right. And I think that what was I going to say? That the world of forms, the
shadow forms, darkness.
Yeah, I can't remember. I'll come back to
that.
There's
also, there's that scene where she's hiding in the dark and in the shadows and trying to not be seen because there's this, possibility of her. I forget what was menacing her, but the shadows and the darkness and the world of forms is like that's kind of the Platonism in the book.
I know what it was. I like the part of you mentioned about hiding from the light of revelation is interesting because it seems that the writers find them anyway, right? The book, it seems to take place in a kind of tribulation. It has a specific time and place, which we don't really need we don't need a year, but it takes place in a specific part of America. I mean, it's in America. We're in America, but it's a kind of dark allegory for, like you were saying, like a tribulation. Like these are almost like these are archetypal figures, but they're so real and they seem so like naturalistic in a way. I think
a child of God, perhaps quite like yourself.
There's a part that's right. Yeah, I can't wait to get to that book. There's a part on page 145. I put key passage, sleeping vampirical. So it says, page 145. He worked until nightfall, and then a little later, he was beginning to feel lightheaded in his empty belly and drawn up in him like a fist. He worked on for a while in the dark, and then he quit. There was just a part about the fist and holding the fist in at the belly. The blade entry and the belly rising and falling. There were no lights at the preacher's house. When he got to the store, there were no lights there and there was nobody about. He did not know how late it was. He slid the pick and shovel beneath the porch and went up the road, a solitary figure in that warm and breathing dark, shadowless and unwitnessed. He slept the night in the lee of a hayrick and he woke again before it was light, before there was any sign or hope of light. Something had passed on the road, and he lay huddled against the chill of pending dawn with his arms crossed on his chest. In that attitude, the living inflict upon the dead, and he listened, but he could hear nothing. There was something fearful about. He listened for dogs to bark down along the road, but no dogs barked. It's like the hounds in the last scene. He lay awake a long time, and the morning came up in the east in a pale accretion of light, heralded by no cock, no waking birds. He rose and went into the road, dusting the chaff from his wretched clothes and stomping his feet in the fine boots now caulked with grave earth. If you look for me tomorrow, you'll find me a grave man. He went along toward the town, and as he topped a rise in the road, 2 buzzards labored up out of a dead tree in a field from which hung the bodies of 3 men. One was dressed in a dirty white suit. Nothing moved. The buzzards swung away beyond the woods, and there was no sound and no movement anywhere. There was only the gradual gathering of light to which these eyeless dead came alien and unreal, like figures wandered from a dream. We just had that scene about the androids that were like aliens wandering, dead and eyeless, right? Blinded. He hurried on into the empty town. It was daylight now. When he got to the store, Clark's rig was standing untethered at the corner of the porch with the mule asleep in the traces. He went up the steps and tapped at the door and waited and tapped again. He peered through the window. His silhouette lay on the floor in the bent light. All was dim and dusty with abandonment. He called. After a while, he descended the steps into the road again, and he stood there and looked all about him and listened for any sound at all, but there was nothing. He turned and went on through the town. He was walking very fast, and after a while, he was running again. It's just like when he dropped the baby off.
Yeah.
He came back around and everything is going forwards but backwards. And it's just like on pages 32 and 47 when the shadows seem to split, like the shadows are their shadow selves almost splitting apart from them. It's just like the other scene where he looked and it's like he saw his shadow attacking somebody, but it wasn't attacking him. It was just his shadow and it was almost apart from him. And so he's venturing further and further into the dark, unwitnessed.
That's another like kind of the theme of the witness. That's something that McCarthy later on in the Border trilogy becomes a little bit more. He fleshes that out more in the Crossing.
The next scene is the part where you were just talking about with the woman and the Protestant woman.
She's a funny one. The whole snake thing. What'd you make of that? The killing all the snakes.
Well,
it's kind of straightforward, but
I saw it as a kind of Pentecostalist ambiance in the book because Harold Bloom said that the American religion was through literature was a combination of a kind of Pentecostalism and Gnosticism, which is inherent in
they're kind of the same thing.
It's kind of well there's a charismatic there's a kind of charismatic spirit of wandering mixed with a kind of pseudo mystical element brought over from Europe that occurs.
What I like about McCarthy too, though, is how it feels. That religion feels alien to like he makes it feel a little bit alien, and he'll often there'll be characters that misquote the scriptures often. Like there's this misunderstanding of the scriptures and sometimes an inversion of the symbolism that the characters make mistakes in their remembering what they've heard told to them about the scriptures. And I like that he does this subtle critique of Protestantism because he himself was, he grew up Roman Catholic. I guess one of the people that he had he was really closest with and had the most correspondence with was his traditional Catholic, his brother's wife. She was like a very traditional Catholic. He had a lot of letters between she and him. So I think I like the alienness and the kind of, it's not an irreverence. He doesn't have this. There's not this like spiteful atheist vibe to his look at Pentecostalism and like the charismatic stuff. But it's just kind of weird. Like when the lady asks her, "Are you saved?" and she's like, "I don't know," and the lady's like, "Oh, you're one of them." It's like,
well, there's a kind of unreliability. The unreliable narrator certainly occurs in this book. Who is the speaker? Who is the speaker? Who's telling the story? Because in Child of God,
you have a limited third person narration that zooms in and out, and then sometimes I think the narration is like reflecting the experience of the character, right? It's like the world looks this way, it feels this way to the character, therefore you have a window through the narrator. So he goes first person without going first person, I'd say is what he does. I think that's part of what's so good about his voice is the way that he's able to ride that line between like he's kind of doing first person while doing third person. And then he'll jump into second person every once in a while, see the child and the beginning of Blood Meridian.
Well, the speaker seems to be a kind of spirit, a kind of embodied spirit that occurs that lets us see into it. It's not a God's eye view, but it is some sort of
sometimes you get more, but sometimes
it has a higher dimension, a higher linguistic capacity than the characters do, for instance. So much more for instance, in Macbeth, there are elements of Macbeth. In Macbeth, we get like in all Shakespeare, we get high and low characters. We get characters who speak in rhythm and meter, and then we get the porter who speaks in prose. So we know the way the characters speak embodies who they are as people. Then we get characters who the first thing that Macbeth says in the play is "So foul and fair day I have not seen." He's just echoing what the witches said, the weird sisters, the dark triad when they first appeared in the play would say foul is fair is foul and foul is fair. So he's echoing what they're saying, but they've inverted their rhythmic patterns. So they are inverting what they want to accomplish in the play. But in this, we get a kind of embodied spirit that has a higher dimension of language, and we certainly get that when we're seeing it almost through the eyes of victims looking at the dark triad as they pop up throughout the narrative.
Right. But there's like with Rinthi, when he's describing Rinthi, you get this sense of the innocence that she feels and that slight grace that she feels, even though she's gaunt and thin. It describes her eyes as being sunken and she's malnourished. Clearly, like she's just eating. You got any of those little black candies from the store or whatever? That she's eating the black candies and whatever else, cornmeal. They only eat like cornbread. But like when it describes like this paragraph for the rest of the day, she followed behind the cart as if tethered to it. The tinker did not speak, nor did he look back, and he seemed to have no need of rest. They went through the late afternoon, curiously processional and grave among the bandaged shadows. The tinker stooped in the rotted leather with his cap far back on his head and eyes to the ground, and her caught up in the wake of the cart and its lonely tolling tinware, like some creature wrapped and besourced by witches' music, demon piping. Come evening, the tinker left the road and turned up a weedy wagon path, giving her a brief look backward and motioning with his head. They climbed up through a field, the cart badly tilted, and the tinker near horizontal in the harness. When they came to the top of the hill, the track turned and they went on in blue dusk through a high meadow out of which sprang small fowl to wheel away with indignant cries over the sedge. At the end of this meadow was a cabin. So, I mean, the first paragraph was better. I should have just read the first part of the first one, but it's you get this feeling of how you see how she feels without it saying how she feels, right? Like she feels like she's tied to the tinker because the tinker tells her, well, I know where the baby is. I can bring you to the baby, he tells her. And she says, okay, let's go. And he basically tries to do some Faustian stuff. He's like, what would you do for it? And but it's curiously processional. Now, from the third person perspective, it's going to look curiously processional, but for her, she's like this is her journey. This is where she's been trying to go for so long. She feels like she's tethered to the cart. She sees the tinker as this evil guy. His head, what is his hat? His cap far back on his head and eyes to the ground. The rotted leather with his cap. So I think he does this fun. His books are fun to read, partially because of just that voice that he has. Like he zooms in and out like this, and you're always wondering who's talking to because there's a lack of quotation marks, and sometimes he just throws dialogue into the middle of the paragraph without punctuate. You don't but somehow after you've read enough of McCarthy, who's talking. You get used to it, and it his voice is unique, is what I'm saying, in way too many words.
He throws out it's like the Family Guy warehouse has the book that says rules on it, and he says, "Get this out of my sight." He throws the rule book out. But we have the seamlessness of characters who speak within the narrative. Like we're looking at it all as one thing, and it's not demarcated by quotation marks. I really like that in his books because it shows the unnecessary nature of dialogue with marking it off, telling us that it's dialogue. I like that he does that. It's something new.
Well, it makes you think of kind of the King James Bible as well, because you look at the King James Bible, and most Bibles are not going to have quotation marks. Like it's just it is something that makes it feel a little bit more timeless. And also the way I've heard you in your streams about some of the other McCarthy books, you mentioned how he uses and they rode on and this and that, and he uses those what do you call, like the conjunctions in there without commas, and he'll use that sometimes to show the passage of time, or sometimes to slow down the narrative and almost go into like slow motion, like when Llewellyn Moss is in the hotel room, the way that he uses the ands and the shorter sentences and sometimes the longer sentences. He's got this beautiful way of writing, and the punctuation becomes he very artistically uses punctuation in a way that kind of only he can do, because then if anybody else does it, it's kind of like, oh, you're trying to do like Cormac McCarthy. You're not going to use quotation marks now. It's like his thing, which is and it works. It doesn't
Well,
come off as corny or.
We were discussing beforehand also that, you know, the revision process in books, and there is an element of what seems almost like a beat generation type of. I mean, there's a bit of On the Road to the Dharma Bums, and what I mean by that is that
I get what you're saying. I can't stand Kerouac as a person.
If Kerouac wrote on a scroll and it's a continuous, he wrote on teletype paper on a scroll like a Walt Whitman.
By hand?
Sort of a Walt Whitman. No, he typed it. He typed it all to.
He was too drunk to do it by hand.
He wouldn't drink when he wrote. So Kerouac's right. I mean, it's not really important, but his writing process was that he was an athlete. So before he wrote, he would run a lot. He would exercise. He would eat well, and then when he was writing, he would try to write everything all at once. And then, of course, the first thought, best thought thing about the beat generation, which is like sort of taken from the Romantic poets, is a misnomer. The revision process is almost more. It takes up more time when writing than the composition process. So
I think that definitely has to be how he wrote. Because I just read this. A friend of mine sent me an image. What was it? It was an image of we have access to some of his like original what do you call it? Some of his typed up pages from Blood Meridian. I'll send this to you. You'll like it. It's like the first page of Blood Meridian before he revised it. And it's really different. You know, it's like see the child in the snow or something. It's like see the child there. It's like it's not just see the child.
A facsimile of his revision. Yeah. And, well, on page
another page, you know, the Road was initially called the Grail. That was like the working title of his first draft of the Road was the Grail, which gives you some insight into the really how it's you know, don't tell the edgy atheists, but it's a very Christian book overall.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's like because that means it's like Lancelot and Galahad.
Remember they describes the child as a tabernacle, and by the end, the child is glowing with light. The child is not Christ, but he's this source of grace for the man.
Right. That's what Galahad ends up being. That Galahad achieves the Grail because he's the most Christ-like of the various knights errant.
Interesting. Yeah, the boy does. You know, the boy wants to get. Why? I thought we were the good guys. You know, we're not the good guys if we're not going to share food with this guy. You know, he wants the son wants to kind of break these the barriers between them and the people in the world around them, and. Yeah, I think the Road is actually I think it's underrated.
That's also interesting because the breaking of bread is Eucharistic, and that's what I think the Grail is. The Grail is the quest to achieve the Eucharist in the Valley of Ashes.
Well, you can see why he couldn't name it that, because it's too much. It's like you can't. Then it becomes because you could tell he really likes Flannery O'Connor. And McCarthy is a moralizer. I think people mischaracterize him as not be. I think his books are very moralizing, but he does it in a more tasteful way than, at least a tasteful way for his era. But he loved Flannery O'Connor. I don't think he would. I don't think he would label her as a moralizer in a bad way. But he does very much. This is an incredibly moralizing book. Yeah. Like your Culla is damned because of what Culla does, and the grace that's given to Culla is denied over and over and over again. Yeah. And but you could see why he wouldn't name it the Grail. The Road makes more sense, and it lets it hit a wider audience, and it changes it a lot if you do the Grail. There were some pages that were people got access to some of the original language and some of the unedited pages from his archives of the road, and the religious symbolism was heavier. So he pruned out some of it and he distilled it to make it a little bit less obvious and a little bit leave it a little bit more open.
I want to move us to the storm, because the storm we learn on one of the pages we were just going on. The storm seems to surround the book itself, and oftentimes in literature, storms will function as exterior symbols of an inner state. And when he comes upon the storm here, we sort of cross over into a new world where he sort of meets his fate. Not his fate, but he meets his destruction. On page 163, it says, when the horse came out on the hard ground on the bluff above the river, he could hear its hoofs clatter dead along the road, a sound moving sourceless through the dark, no silhouette among the sparse trees of the ridge, no horseman against the night sky. The rider above them faded out of hearing, and Home knew that he was coming down the road toward the river in the soft mud, and after a while he could hear the chink of the horse's trappings and the animals' windy breathing in the dark. And then they came out on the landing, visible against the river, the rider leading the horse. And then we get the storm. So on page 164, he says, the river was dark and oily, and it tended away into nothing. This is real Miltonian. No shoreline, the sky grading into the black wash, little lighter than the water about them, so they seemed to hang in some great depth of darkness like spiders in a well. At the bottom of the page, they seemed to be in high wind, and water was blowing over the deck. The river was breaking violently on the canted flank of the boat, a perpetual concussion of black surf that rode higher until it began to override the rail and fall aboard the great slapping sounds. They were careening through the night wildly. The barge shuddered heavily, and a sheet of water came rearward and circled the capstan and fanned with a thin hiss. It's just onomatopoeia. And then there was a loud explosion.
You can see his love of Melville here. He's a little Moby Dick.
Oh yeah,
Moby Dick in this.
Yeah. Then there was a loud explosion, and something passed above their heads, screaming. And then there was silence. The ferry lurched and came about. The wall of water receded, and they were drifting in windless calm and total dark. His eyeballs ached. By the way, the word eyeball comes from Macbeth. Thou dost fear mine eyeballs. He was a neologism from Shakespeare. He clawed at the darkness before him. This is page 166, cursing, throwing himself to the deck again while the horse went past with a sound like pistol fire. A black fog had set in, and he could feel it needling on his face and against his blind eyeballs, as if all that fury had been swallowed up in the river, traceless as fire, unbalanced, staggering in such blackness. I'm kind of skipping through here.
Yeah, I'm trying to follow along. I'm like, wait, how did you jump that quickly?
Yeah,
I don't know how you got that quick.
I've distilled the visceral parts.
Yeah, you've already
page 167 at the top. He says he could hear the whisper of water going up and down over the deck. It sounded as if it were looking for him. After a while, he cupped his hands and howled into the night. There was not even an echo. And then just on the next page at the bottom, 168, he says, this is the best part. He says, he already had a rope up from the bow and in his hand. Now as the barge slid past a last clump of trees, there were 3 men standing on the bank of the river in the gentle rain, with the fire behind them projecting their shapes outward into soaring darkness and with no dimension to them at all. And so this is a great passage.
Yeah, like, you missed the part before that. What about an upright shape that seemed to be convulsed there for a moment before going from sight, like something that had incinerated itself? It's kind of the same idea, but that's amazing.
Yeah, this is an amazing part, because he's gotten on this ferry to go across the river, and there's a horse, and the storm wells up, this wall of water, and he crosses the abyss, and the horse disappears, and now he's come upon these 3 men, and you know, you
You like
think
how
of
he's left alone in the ferry. The guy that put him on
yeah,
the ferry, the guy that owns the ferry, knew he shouldn't go across, but then he gets offered the money and he takes it.
yeah.
He loses his ferry. Then Kulla's left on the ferry just with a dumb, blind beast in the middle of the dark. It's very symbolic.
It makes me think of there's a poem by Jim Morrison of all people, Horse Latitudes. It's a book by Paul Muldoon too. He talks about when the Spanish were bringing on the slave ships, and they came across a storm. They would often ditch the horses into the water. So he says, immute nostril agony, carefully refined and sealed over. So in this one again, we get this black
You got to do
rider
a
and this
stream just on
horse.
Jim Morrison's poetry. You got to do
Oh
that
yeah,
someday, man.
yeah. The Lords and New Creatures, he says.
How much does it cost for a sponsored stream? But you got to do it in Jim Morrison's. Like you have to do it in character as Jim Morrison.
Let's go get some
as Val Kilmer
tacos.
as Jim Morrison.
Yeah.
You're like seduce. You have to be seducing yourself in the camera, like Jim.
We'll make a movie, call it Zero on Chief Mojo Rising. Hiya.
No, it's early Jim though. You got to be early Jim, where you're like the more effeminate, pretty boy Jim, not drunk and bloated Jim.
And then here we go to page. Let's go to the description of these guys. They were watching him on the top of page 170. He says, neither of them spoke. Home looked about him. The third one was standing just in the rim of light to his left, watching him. He was dressed in a dark and shapeless suit that could not have buttoned across his chest, and he wore a shirt with some kerchief or rag knotted at the neck. His face scowled redly out of a great black beard. He jerked his head at home. Come up to the fire, he said. And they this is such a sinister scene. I mean, because Home, when he crosses over this river, it's like he becomes a different character. He's been this guy that is soaked in sin, and then he gets washed in this river, but instead of being saved, he ends up in this place that's even worse. But he finds people that are worse than he is, and that doesn't seem to be possible in the book. But he comes across, he meets his mirror selves or his own destruction here, and they are so sinister because they offer him things, they offer him food, they say sit next to the fire, they make him take off his boots, and he starts eating, and you get the feeling that he's eating human meat.
Yeah, they never say it, but you just they goad him into eating. They're like, "Why don't you eat the meat?" Yeah. And it describes how it feels. It describes the texture of it, but there's no indication that it's human meat, except he makes you almost know that this dude just did like this dark Eucharist, this inverted, this inverted Lord's Supper with the demonic triad here, and it's like it's all over for him once he eats the meat.
Yeah, it had the consistency of Huang, was dusted with ash, tasted of sulfur. He's eating like anti-mana or something. He's eating hell food.
Sulfur.
I mean, it's crazy.
Of hell. He's eating the mana of hell.
And I wrote on the top of 171, he talks now in their presence. He talks more now in their presence than he has the entire book. Mm-hmm. And they offer him fire and food. And it's a real like Orphic journey here. And he just begins singing. I mean, he's talking, but it's like, he's just like, he hasn't talked almost the whole book. And now because of this, where he is, he's like opened up to these dark spirits. And it says, page 171, like in the middle of the page, Home swallowed and glanced at him again in the upslant of light. His beard shone and his mouth was red and his eyes were shadowed lunettes with nothing there at all. That is so crazy. This is
nothing.
He never says his name. I wrote on page 175, naming equals Genesis. This seems to be outside of creation in the chaos zone or a hellmouth.
Is that one word?
Then page 176. I wrote, Satan sits before him at the fire. They were cracked and weather blackened, and one was cleft from tongue to toe like a hoof. dead man's boots. He felt cold all over. Just the whole.
Well, the symbol
whole
of the boots too,
chapter.
right? Cola had stolen these boots. These are the
That's
boots that
right.
he'd stolen from the squire that he had worked for. He betrayed the squire who gave him work, and he took off with his boots. And then the squire ends up getting killed by these guys. They take some of his tools and they end up using the tools to murder somebody. And it ends up kind of looking like Cola committed this murder and murdered the squire, although he didn't. So he's getting blamed for these things. And the circumstantial evidence that seems to indicate to the people around him that he's committed these crimes, that he actually hasn't. But the crimes that he has committed and the guilt and the shame that he does carry with him are what seem to be attracting this suspicion from the world around him. So it's like the shame and the guilt of him walking in his aimless journey of trying to deny his sin, trying to bury it in the earth, trying to never speak of it, because if you just don't speak of it, then it's not real. But his denial of speaking of it and naming it ends up actually eating him up and then attracting all this other darkness to him. So it's like this, there's actually like, it's actually very spiritually, it's one of his most overtly spiritual novels, other than The Road, I'd say.
Page 178, he says, no, hold on, that's let's see, the man seems to be seated in the fire. The man seems to be seated in the fire itself.
The judge, and then there's a passage of the judge like that in Blood Meridian as well.
Page 179. This passage is crazy. Page 179. Page 179. Like, Home watched the fire. Top of the page. Home watched the fire. In his unfocused vision, the coals beaded up in pins of light and drifted like hot spores. Blood had come up in his ears, and they were warm and half deaf with it. I don't care, he said. You will care, mister. I think maybe you are somebody else because you don't seem to understand me much. Now get the boots off. Harmon, he's gonna harm him. Harmon looked up and smiled. Mark Harmon. Home looked at the man. The fire had died some, and he could see him better, sitting beyond it, and the scene compressed into a kind of depthlessness, so that the black woods beyond them hung across his eyes oppressively, and the man seemed to be seated in the fire itself, cradling the flames to his body as if there were something beyond there beyond all warming. He reached and slid the boots from his feet. Beyond all warming. This is Dantean, because in the Ninth Circle, Satan is in ice. He's beyond all warmth because it's so hot that it's cold. So Satan is in the Ninth Circle, headlong hurled from the farthest chain of the from the utmost top to from the furthest top to the utmost pole, down to the Ninth Circle, head first in ice. So when Dante and Virgil climb down Satan, the world inverts and they're climbing up, and then they see pinwheels of fire where the worst sinners are reserved as just treachery. So Judas and Brutus.
Saw that same the river flowing upwards too, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it was at the beginning. It was at the beginning when he spits, and the river looks like it's going down, but it's up, but it's down, right? And it's cold. Page 181. Page 181, sort of below, right below the middle. The fire had burned low, and there was but a single cleft and yellow serpent tongue of flame standing among the coals. The whole thing is just, it's like encoded with, it's almost like it's written, it's like it's written in hell coals or something. He says, oh yeah, okay, so this is the end of the chapter. I'm just going to skip to the end of this chapter here, page 182. He says,
in the conversations, like the thing about nowheres, where you headed? Nowheres. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly. Who are you?
Yeah. She ain't here to tell it her way, is she? No. And where do you reckon they've got by now? I don't know. Just further on down the road, don't you reckon? Yes, I reckon. I ain't studied it. Ain't studied it? No. He seemed to be speaking to the fire. When he lifted his head, he could see the three of them standing there watching him, ragged, filthy, threatful, as if that's their names. Ragged, filthy, and threatful. Yes, the man said, you studied it. There. Home didn't answer. He turned his face to the fire again. Harmon, the man said, leave him be. Home didn't look up. He heard their steps receding out of the firelight among the wet leaves toward the river where the ferry was tied. He had the shirt clutched in both hands and was staring in mute prayer at the wand of flame that trembled before him so precariously, and he did not move at all. Then he heard steps coming back. He lifted his head. Harmon came smiling out of the dark like an apparition. He did not have the rifle. He slouched toward Home and bent over him. Home recoiled. Harmon didn't seem to notice. It's crazy because he comes across these guys and he doesn't die. And you know why he doesn't die, because every sin that his sins are again just multiplying on him just by coming across.
Not only
guys.
does he doesn't not die, but they invite him to, they break bread with him, and this kind of like, they commune. He communes with them. This is what he's doing. He's communing
right.
with these guys.
That's true.
And then and then there's, what do you make of the shoe swapping thing? Because Culla had stolen these shoes from the squire earlier. He's sitting by the fire, and they're like, nice boots you got there. And the boots that they're all wearing, the lowest of rank of them, they're like knitted together with wire. They're fixed and mended with wire, which is also in the crossing. Remember the Indian in the crossing, his shoes are like them was Mexican there was Mexican boots he had, or what was left of them, it says, and they're mended with wire too. And then the head guy, the bearded one, tells him, take off your boots. I want those boots. So he gives him the new boots, and then the boots go down the line to his lesser minions. And then Culla gets the boots of the lesser of the minions that are mended together with wire. And that's what he leaves with.
Yeah, I think that there's something to be said here for, well, in Macbeth, he says, why do you dress me in borrowed robes? One of the metaphors that's constant in the play, and this is a literary metaphor that is often used, is that the symbol of wearing the other man's clothes, or another man's clothes, or the clothes of the rank, or whatever it happens to be, symbolizes the putting on of the new person. So he's already mired in sin and death, and here he seems to be, he's putting on the dead man's shoes. It's also, there's like a, when people talk about empathy, it's often, the metaphor is often like walking in another man's shoes. What's it like to walk in his shoes? And here he's already walking in the shoes of a dead man. He's dead in sin. But also these guys are looking for the child. They're looking for the child, and like you said, he's communing with these spirits of destruction and death. So it makes sense that he would like transfer this sin onto the ultimate sin, which is about to occur at the end of the book.
And I think, it's also the way he's invited to this communion. He's just seeking comfort, right? He doesn't seek these guys out. In fact, he's fearful of them. He doesn't fully trust them. They're menacing, threatening, and accusatory towards him. But he sits down with them anyways because they have the fire. So they're going to give him warmth, and maybe they'll give him some food. So he's doing this out of, it's his sloth. It's his, he's not doing this out of seeking anything. It's his kind of lack of will and lack of using his will well that leads him here.
Yeah. Well, the next chapter brings us back to the Tinker, who's kind of come full circle. And now the sister mother has come to the Tinker. And this is the great passage you were talking about earlier. This is page 192. This is the great speech in the book. So I'm just going to read some parts of it on bottom of 192. She's looking for the baby, and the Tinker says, you ain't fit to have him. And then she says, that ain't for you to judge. I've done judged, he says. And she leaned forward, and the Tinker jerked his arm away. It's the bottom of 192. He says, he leaned his face toward her. Give, he said. I give a lifetime wandering in a country where I was despised. Can you give that? I give 40 years strapped in front of a cart like a mule till I couldn't stand straight to be hanged. Interesting foreshadowing. I've not got soul one in this world save a old half crazy sister that nobody never would have they never would me. I've been rocked and shot at and whipped and kicked and dog bit from one end of this state to the other, and you can't pay that back. You ain't got nothing to pay it with. Them accounts is in blood, and they ain't got nothing in this world to pay them out with. I'd care for him. They wouldn't nobody like me. Like you done? He done it. I never. So she's blaming it on her brother, and he says, you wouldn't care for him. Look how the kid already ended up. Yes, the Tinker said he's the one would have laid it to early rest, save my being there, because I know sickness. He's got sickness. He, the Tinker, stopped. It was very quiet in the cabin. They could hear the branch murmuring, or perhaps it was the wind. The Tinker stopped and stared at her with his viper's eyes gone wild in their black wells. It ain't his'n. And then page 194, I'm skipping. It's no right child, she said. You don't want him. Her body was contorted with pain and her eyes closed. Yes, said the Tinker. You try it, wouldn't you, you lying little bitch? He flung her arm back and she crumpled up and held it in her other hand. The Tinker rose and stood gaunt and trembling above her. You'll see me dead before you see him again, he said. You won't never have no rest, she moaned. Not never. He didn't have any rest. The fire had died to the coals. The Tinker swung down the lamp, and their shadows wheeled wildly from each other and froze on opposite walls. Don't follow me, the Tinker said. You follow me, and I'll kill you. So we've finally got a character who's willing to truly stand up, right? And he saved the child. He saved the child. And he's saying that no matter how it ended up that way, you didn't do anything and you're never going to see him again. So he saved him. However, we got to get to the end of the book, which is...
Well, it's interesting. The Tinker, I mean, he feels rejected. He feels, you know, the world hates him. The world just, you know, whips on him, basically. I like that part where he says, I've got no soul, one in this world, save old half-crazy sister that nobody never would have, like they never would me. Yeah. So the world would never have him. The world rejects him. And he sees the baby, kind of sees the baby as something like himself, right? Rejected by the world,
that's true.
Out in the woods alone.
That's true, so yeah.
He kind of sees himself in that baby.
Page 2, I'm skipping to page 211 here. Because this has the Vega and the water serpent, like you mentioned earlier, and we have this kind of zoom out cosmic darkness with speckled light thrown in. And then at the bottom, hurrying along with the sunrise at her back, she had the look of some deranged refugee from its occurrence. Before she'd gone far, she heard a horse on the road behind her. And here's the horse again. There's constant messaging of, you know, the horses, then the horses bringing the rider. And this reminds me of, there's a poem by Sylvia Plath called Ariel. This reminds me of Stasis and Darkness. It came out of the sun at a slow canter in a silhouette, agonized to shapelessness. She crouched in the bushes and watched it, a huge horse emerging, seared and whole from the sun's eye and passing like a wrecked caravel, gaunt-ribbed and black and mad with tattered saddle and dangling stirrups and hoofs, clopping softly in the dust and passing enormous and emaciate and inflamed, and the sound of it dying down the road to a distant echo of applause in a hall forever empty. This is the sailing ship I mentioned earlier, the Spanish. Well, the Portuguese caravel was a Portuguese. Caravel was a Portuguese sailing ship in the 15th, 17th century. And it gives provenance and pedigree to the horse. It intimates kind of slavery, as if all the itinerants of the dark landscape are slaves to shadows. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna skip to the swine.
We gotta do the swine. The swine one. I just want to say, like, what I think an underrated, or not underrated, an understated influence on Dostoevsky. If you like, look, everyone's going to mention American authors like Melville, Faulkner, Flannery O'Connor, but Dostoevsky is actually really influential on him. And a lot of, when you read like The Crossing is a very Dostoevsky-esque novel. The Crossing is like a lot of these long conversations, the conversation with the ex-priest in The Crossing, that's pure Dostoevsky. And Demons is the book that I think is really influential on this. I mean, clearly the name Demons, the concept of characters that are, you know, embracing this darkness and this, you know, this worldview that brings them towards death and destruction. But the Demons starts with, there's an epigraph in Demons before the first chapter. And I highly recommend Demons. I did like a several part stream on it. This book is like, I think it's better than the Brothers Karamazov. I think Demons is an amazing novel. I think it's, I don't know, maybe not objectively better, but just for me, I prefer it. I think it's better in a lot of ways. It's very much If you like Cormac McCarthy and you're thinking about reading some Dostoevsky, I'd go for Demons and be patient with it. It's long and there's just a lot of conversations and philosophy being kind of hashed out. But first there's a little poem from Pushkin called Demons, and then there's a quote from the Gospel according to St. Luke. Now a large herd of swine was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him to let them enter these. So he gave them leave. Then the demons came out of the man and entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. When the herdsmen saw what had happened, they fled and told it in the city and in the country. Then the people went out to see what had happened. They came to Jesus and found the man from whom the demons had gone, sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who had seen it told them how he who had been possessed with demons was healed. So that symbol gets touched on later on with Stepan Trofimovich gives this speech about, I finally understand what this means. And it's very prophetic concerning the history of Russia and the Bolshevik Revolution and everything. But I'm like 99% sure that this book was a big influence on him in general, and he's definitely hearkening to that with this passage that BLA here is about to pick through.
It's interesting about Dostoevsky because you have this conversation with younger writers. Oftentimes, writers who are or burgeoning writers will, especially young, will make statements about how they don't read; they just write. But the problem is that if words are your currency, books are made of words. If words are your currency, then I can't think of any great writer who was not a reader. And you tend to absorb, hey, thanks, Gorilla Biscuits, right there. Gifted 1 membership for me. Oftentimes, the great writers will have an intense knowledge of literature. Kind of like, I don't know. I think some of the great comics have a kind of encyclopedic knowledge of the history of comedy or, stand up or whatever. Norm had that. But that certainly seems to be the way with, and I also appreciate not knowing much about certain writers. I have a different feeling about Thomas Pynchon. I'm not sure if Thomas Pynchon is even real. Thomas Pynchon, by the way, just published another novel. It just came out like 2 weeks ago, and so when we mentioned postmodern, it's a tangent, but when we mentioned postmodernism at the beginning, oftentimes Thomas Pynchon is mentioned, and he's just come up again because his book Vineland is the source for the One Battle After Another book or a film.
Have you read a single Thomas Pynchon book? I can't make myself do it. I've tried.
I've read Thomas Pynchon, but I can't. I'm not going to read Gravity's Rainbow unless somebody sponsors it. I'm not going to try to dive back into it again. My problem.
I told you this before. I tried to read Gravity's Rainbow when I was 20, and I couldn't get past a couple chapters. I just thought it just seemed so stupid. I don't know.
My problem with Thomas Pynchon is it's almost the opposite of this. Is that it seems to be what Don DeLeo calls data spew. It's almost just like feeding the AI, and to the point where this is kind of a half-hearted joke, but I'm not even sure if Thomas Pynchon is real. It's one thing.
It's just like a CIA cutout. They just
like a cutout or like some sort of deep academic psyop written by committee meant to feed AI or something. Because
like the first AI author, and they've
yes.
This is why Philip K. Dick was so freaked out, because he realized this. Like Thomas Pynchon was Philip K. Dick's handler, and he was blasting Valis into Philip K. Dick's brain, and
I'm kind of half joking, but if you got a problem with that and you like Thomas Pynchon, then let me know in the comments afterwards. What should I be knowing about Thomas Pynchon?
You. No,
I get it. I get it. But
Pynchon, you're banned.
Yeah. But I don't know. But anyway, let's. I'm going to read this part with the. So in this part, do you want to describe what happens with
No, he comes upon some swine herders in the woods. He's wandering through the woods aimlessly, comes upon some swine herders. There's like some interesting biblical imagery in that classic Protestant inversion where the swine herder is kind of telling him about the swine. He says, there's more than one mule foot in that lot. He said, what? Mule foot. I calculate there's several hundred head of them alone, and they ain't no common hog to among them. What's a mule foot? Holmes said. The drover squinted professionally. Mountain hog from north of here. You ain't ever seen one? No. Got a foot like a mule. You mean they ain't got a split hoof? Nary split to it. I ain't ever seen no such hog as that, Holmes said. I ain't surprised, the drover said. But you can see one here if you've a mind to. I'd admire to, Holmes said. Drover shifted his stave again. Seems like that don't agree with the Bible. What would you say? About what? About them hogs being unclean on account that they got a split foot. I ain't ever heard that, Holmes said. I heard it preached in a sermon one time. Feller knowed right smart about the subject. Said the devil had a foot like a hog's. He laid claim to it was in the Bible, so I reckon it's so. It's like, I mean, it's a total inversion there, because it's like it's an inversion of the split hoof imagery in the scriptures in the Old Testament. And you got a passage you found there.
It reminds me of Norm Macdonald talking about how in the future, you used to have one picture of your ancestors, and it'd be like your granddad with a pitchfork, like, and then in the future, and the granddad always looked like, he was like, you got to get back and slop them hogs. He used to stand there for 8 hours taking the picture. So it says on page 216, they seem together with the hogs to be in flight from some act of God, fire or flood, schisms in the earth's crust. And then he says on page, I'm gonna get to page, skip to page.
A hog is a hog.
218.
And simple, and that's about all you can say about him. And smart, don't think they ain't. Smart as the devil. And don't be fooled by one that ain't got nary clove foot, because he's devilish too.
Yeah. Page 218, it says, top of 218, Home rushed to higher ground like one threatened with flood and perched upon a rock there to view the course of things. He's like Satan laid upon the rock in adamantine chains in Paradise Lost. It says the hogs were in full stampede. One of the droves passed curiously erect as though braced with a stick and rotating slowly with his arms outstretched in the manner of a dancing sleeper. Hogs were beginning to wash up on the rock, their hoofs clicking and rasping with harsh snorts. Home recoiled to the rock's crown and watched them. The drover who had spoken him swept past with bowed back and hands aloft, a limp and ragged scarecrow flailing briefly in that rabid freeze, so that Holmes saw tilted upon him for just a moment out of the dust and pandemonium 2 walled eyes beyond hope and a dead mouth beyond prayer, borne on like some old gospel recreant seized sevenfold in the flood of his own nether invocations, or grotesque hero bobbing harried and unwilling on the shoulders of a mob, stricken in their iniquity to the very shape of evil, until he passed over the rim of the bluff and dropped in his great retinue of hogs from sight. Home blinked and shook his head. The hogs bowled past, squealing and plunging, and the chalky red smoke of their passage hung over the river and stained the sky with something of sunset. They were like creatures in a dream. Well, that beats everything I ever seen, one of them said. So the hogs get run off this cliff in an echo of course, Christ exercising the spirit of the man, legion, and throwing it into the hogs who then run off the cliff here. Or it's like in there's a scene in is it Thomas Hardy, Far from the Madding Crowd, where the dog, the point of the novel is like there's a shepherd, and he is going to love the woman who's inherited the house, and then his faithful dog goes down, and all the sheep run off the cliff into the water, and that is the sort of divine action that happens that changes the whole course of their lives. And so they're suffering, but their suffering leads to character, and their character leads to them getting together in the end and falling in love.
Like how the drovers were like there were 3 brothers, I guess, right?
Yeah,
the 3 brothers or 2 brothers. And it says the drovers all had sought shelter among the trees, and Holmes could see a pair of them watching the herd pass with looks of indolent speculation, leaning upon their staves and nodding in mute agreement, as if there was some old injustice being righted in this spectacle of headlong bedlam. Bedlam. That's so good.
And then they blame him, of course, for the whole thing. And a preacher,
one of the brothers got thrown. One of them fell off with this guy. Fell off with him, and Holmes could have caught the guy. Holmes was just sitting there on the rock and just watches him freaking fly off the cliff.
Yeah, and so the preacher shows up And the preacher's like, I think this is your fault. Let's and they're like, let's hang him. And he's like, no, we don't want to hang him. And then they're going to have it. Yeah, it ain't biblical. Then they're going to have a trial. Then they don't have a trial. And finally, he ends up going next to the driver, and he just jumps. He jumps off the cliff, and the driver gets the pale sky were small, erect, and simian shapes. I said he jumps himself, following the path of the possessed swine, fall into the mire rather than across the abyss straight in. So he falls straight in. He goes in, and then when he ends up, we have another intra chapter here.
But in case you guys miss it, I mean, he himself, like, he's being transported and escorted to, go to trial or whatever. Yeah. He himself jumps off the cliff just like the swine. So at this point, he's being accused of things like, it's not really clear. He's not directly responsible for the guy's death, but they're of the opinion that he could have stopped it and that he spooked the swine. Now, and if you've been around like sheep or cattle or swine, if you climb up on a rock and they're trying to pass through this little narrow gate, there's this narrow passageway that's like over the top of this river, and Kola does go and just sit like an idiot right on this rock where he can basically touch the swine that are passing him, and they are going to get spooked, right? These are swine. They're trying to stay away from the people, and in some ways, he's not directly responsible, but there's some agency there, right? So it's cool how he does that. Like, where Kola's not, it's not like Kola killed the swine. He just kind of sat in that place and looked, and didn't even think to move and get out of their sight so they don't get spooked. And he didn't think to go and try to grab the guy and help him. He just sat there and watched.
Well, it's kind of like he didn't kill the child at the beginning. He just placed him in the reeds, right? And just left. Yeah, he didn't do it, but he did it. And the next part is where we get the tinker is back with the child. We see the tinker with the child, and the three men, when they came, might have risen from the ground. And then we have they are like revenants. Like, this is page 231. Home came limping out of the woods, so he gets out of the mire. He came limping out of the woods and crossed the small field, and he comes right back to these three furies again, this dark triad. When he entered the glade, he could see men seated about the fire, and he hobbled on, one hand raised into the firelight. Howdy, said the bearded one. Ain't seen you for a while. It was like a dream's redundancy, like revenants that reoccur in lands laid waste with fever, spectral, palpable as stone. He looked at the child. I'm not gonna describe the child part, but this is horrible.
This part,
this is really, really horrible. He looks at and he sees the child that he had laid, and he says, and then I'm skipping here to page 236.
Maybe the conversation though, like the conversation about naming and about it ain't nothing.
Yeah, they say people in hell ain't got no names. Yeah. He seemed to be speaking to something in the night beyond them all. And then he said, and I'm gonna kind of edit this as I read it. And not for any reason other than goodness and taste here. You can read the book, everybody, but Holmes saw the blade wink in the light like a long cat's eye, slant and malevolent, and a dark smile erupted. I'm going to edit that part out. But they commit the thing that we were talking about, but in a most violent way.
They get all Canaanite with it.
Yes, and it's kind of read. I think you can read into the book that not only do they do that, but they masticate, they feast.
Well, what does say that it describes one of the characters doing that. The one, the lowest, the guy that maybe it was Harmon. He was either Harmon or the guy that's unnamed. Yeah, he gets a mouthful.
Yeah. So then we come to page 238. I will read this paragraph because this is so we've had the reckoning here of all of the violent events here. We have the destruction of innocence in the book, and then we get to what happens to the tinker. Page 238, the tinker in his burial tree was a wonder to the birds. The vultures that came by to nose with their hooked beaks among his buttons and pockets like outrageous pets soon left him naked of his rags and flesh alike. Black mandrake sprang beneath the tree as it will where the seed of the hanged falls, and in spring a new branch pierced his breast and flowered in a green boutonniere perennial beneath his yellow grin. He took the sparse winter snows upon what thatch of hair still clung to his dried skull, and hunters that passed away never chanced to see him brooding among his barren limbs until wind had told the tinker's bones and seasons loosed them one by one to the ground below, and alone his bleached and weathered brisket hung in that lonesome wood like a bone bird cage. Jesus, Lord have mercy. And then we have the end of the book, and we have this last page where we see
terrible here.
Yeah, we have the end here, where we have Cullen. It says his shadow bewandered in a dark parody of his progress. The road went on through a shapeless burn, and for miles there were only the charred shapes of trees in a dead land where nothing moved save windy rifts of ash that rose dolorous and died again down a blackened corridors. Late in the day, the road brought him into a swamp, and that was all. Before him stretched a spectral waste, out of which reared only the naked trees and attitudes of agony and dimly hominoid, like figures in a landscape of the damned. A faintly smoking garden of the dead that tended away to the earth's curve. He tried his foot in the mire before him, and it rose in a vulvate welt, claggy and sucking. He stepped back. A stale wind blew from his desolation, and the marsh reeds and black ferns among which he stood clashed softly like things chained. He wondered why a road should come to such a place. Going back the way by which he came, he met again the blind man tapping through the dusk. He waited very still by the side of the road, but the blind man passing turned his head and smiled upon him his blind smile. Home watched him out of sight. He wondered where the blind man was going. Did he know how the road ended? Someone should tell a blind man before setting him out that way. And that's it. Jesus.
The parable at the end is really good. That's like the blind man parable. It's a good one to reread a few times too. Like the way it's so dense. The ending is pretty dense, right? Like, yes. I mean, it's you get this heightened emotion when the tension builds so well when they're sitting around the fire before the Canaanite scene, before Moloch comes into the scene. But it's just it's tragic, right? Because Kola's given another opportunity, kind of. I mean, it's not like these guys are calling him to repentance, but they're asking him and kind of accusing him of like, well, where's the child come from? Who's this child? And Kola just tells him Holm didn't say anything. It says, right? Yeah. So he asks him about his eye. He sees the baby. The baby's missing an eye. It's just like the child's obviously neglected, right? Like the child's been neglected. The child's been treated poorly. It says he looked at the child at a healed burn down one side of it, and the skin was papery and wrinkled like an old man's. It was naked and half coated with dust, so that it seemed lightly furred. And when it turned to look up at him, he saw one eyeless and angry Freemasonry, bro. Illuminati, red socket like a stoke hole to a brain in flames. He looked away. He looked away. Just that line, right? That he looked away. That's so powerful. So simple. And then so they ask it, like he asked them, what happened to the eye? What happened to his eye? Holmes said. What eye? His eye, he gestured. He ain't got one. His eye, the one he ain't got, rather. I reckon he must have lost it somewheres. He still got one. He ought to have two. Maybe you ought to have more than that. Some folks have two and can't see. That's pretty cool.
Jesus.
Got two and can't see. But yeah, this what do you make of the what was the other thing they talk about here? Oh, it ain't nothing to me. That's the one that like the most heartbreaking line of the book, right? Like they ask him about the baby. He looked at Harmon and then he bent forward and picked up the child and made no gesture at all. It dangled from his hands like a dressed rabbit, a gross eldritch doll with ricket-sprung legs. Like the kid, he's got rickets. It's malnourished. It's never had love. It's dusty. It's in the dirt, right? And it's So what do you want with him? Holmes said. Nothing. No more than you do. He ain't nothing to me. So that's Holmes. Holmes says to him, he ain't nothing to me. Yeah. No. Where's that tinker if he was raising him? He's all raised out. He can't raise no more. You don't need him. So I mean, he ain't nothing to me.
Yeah.
That's
Well, I think that it sort of seals the dark nativity that occurs in this sort of, you know, real reversal of the Christian story in this, because, you know, there's a lot of wood. There's a lot of wood symbolism in this, and
mm,
unlike, Christ is born, uh, and the Magi, the three wise men come. The child is born. We have salvation. In this, we have these this dark triad is looking for him. They consume him, um, instead of um, a chosen sacrifice from Christ for us. We have them consuming him in this
his
dark
creation, right? Like
sacrifice.
you
Yeah,
destroying God's
and
creation,
and
destroying the
and
most
in
precious, the image and likeness of God, and
right,
defiling it and turning it and saying you're just like dust, right? So it's like, and this is when you think about it, this is what the demons wish to do as well, right? Like
yeah,
when Satan's cast out of the garden, and he's told that you'll crawl on your belly and dust you'll eat for the rest of
yeah,
your life. Like
and
so,
instead of Christ being hanged on the tree and being a sacrifice for all of us, and saying, uh, you know, you can't get to the Father except through the Son. I'm the way, the truth, and the light. He said, in this one, we have a father who abandons him, and we have a new kind of surrogate father who picks him up and then is sacrificed on a tree and made a feast for birds. And
well, see,
in
yeah,
the
the tinker actually ends up, even though the tinker is not, he's not a moral man by any means.
Mhm.
He's vengeful, he's spiteful, but at least he does actually try and care for the kid and protect the kid to
He
a certain
does, but
extent.
they kill him and they put him in this tree, and he just becomes beast food, and for everyone to
He
walk by
does.
and like nothing happens.
And
And
then
like you
nobody
said,
notices him. The hunters don't even notice him when they go by.
yeah, it's pretty dark. It's a dark book, but it takes place, of course, in the paradigm of Christianity, like you were saying. It's oftentimes I think books with such a dark trajectory end up being Christian books by default. I mean, it's a
Well, like The
reversal, but
Road. I mean, McCarthy's
right,
great at that. I mean, The Road,
yeah,
No Country for Old Men.
yeah,
It's like, what did they say about like Flannery O'Connor, the Christ? She writes about the Christ haunted South,
hmm,
right? How it's
yeah,
like, the characters of Flannery O'Connor, many of them have rejected Christ, and it's a
yeah,
post-Christian world. Of course, she's Roman Catholic and often writing about confused Protestant characters,
yeah,
and you can see that a little bit of Flannery there
yeah,
with Cormac here. So I think Outer Dark itself, yeah, the book's called Outer Dark. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth,
yeah.
but it's a fun read, and it's not like it's this gloomy, so like, oh, everything's just so bad and horrible type book.
It
I
is a
don't
fun read.
take
It
that
is,
from it.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like you end up taking, like, Cola is a warning, right? Just
yeah,
like Child of God, right? It's just Child of God. Maybe we could do that one another time. Like,
yeah,
that'd be fun because it's
yeah,
it's a similar novel. Child of God is
yeah.
it's like he wrote
It's
Child of God
crazy,
after this.
dude.
Child
Yeah,
of God's nuts.
Child of
It's a little
God
bit
is
more
crazy.
stripped down prose too, right? It's easier to
Yeah,
read Child of God.
it's faster and it is crazy. So we'll try to do that one next time, you guys. And
Hey
let's
guys,
see. I
make
want
sure
to.
to support your boy here.
Yes,
Throw them
please.
super chats. Throw those this guy right here. He was just we were talking a little bit about his the genesis of his channel here,
Yeah,
and this guy's been he was burning candles, reading by candlelight just a few
right.
years ago. He's still paying his internet bills from COVID era. He's still
Yeah,
got gas bills and electric bills he's got to pay. So make sure to support BLA here. This
yeah.
definitely the best booktube channel out there by
Appreciate it.
far. Like, he deserves all the subscribers that he's eventually going to get. They're coming. Though, yeah, the booktube thing, it's like, you look up lit reviews on YouTube, it's kind of sparse. There's not that
Yeah.
much good stuff. You can
Mm.
find nice university lectures and stuff, but I think your boy Mr. Analyzer here, BLA does some good work. So
Well,
thanks for having me on.
most book reviews. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Most book reviews are, the book reviews are like, they're not books. They're no books. There's no book. Like, check out this latest book, and they hold up the book, and it's cardboard, and it's never been opened, and it's a book you've never heard of, and it's like a fake book or something. And there's
it's hard. It's like to turn books into like these quick consumption items is weird too. It's like the nature of YouTube and book reviews. They're kind of like oil and water a little bit, right? Because you can, I don't know. Sometimes you want to do a book review, and then 3 years later you want to review the same book again. Yeah. I feel like that's what I want to see. I want to see you redo books, right? Like do Blood Meridian again.
There's a few that I would like to review. Of course, I've got a giant stack that I need to do, but there are a few that I would like to go back to, certainly. And I still need to do. I mean, I've done half of Shakespeare and half of Elizabethan and Jacobean literature, and I started off doing that. I need to go back to that and finish the other half. There's a bunch of stuff, and I've been doing so many movies lately that I would like to get back to literature, because there's also no movies being made. So we'll
like books.
We'll see.
No good books,
yeah, that's true. And there's also a thing. I mean, anybody who's Jay talks a lot about going into bookstores and it's all Funko Pops, and now it's La Boo Boo. La Boo Boo. But now, if you go into a new bookstore, we went into a new bookstore in Maine, and the quality of the books is like it's kind of like when you buy clothes now, in the like when your dad had a pair of Levi's and they lasted 30 years, and now you buy clothes and they last 6 months, and then nothing's made well. Well, it's the same with books. The books, the titles of books are too long. The quality of the books being made is very cheap, and the covers of the books are they're almost too fully artistic, too flourished, too plastic, or something. The quality of it's weird.
And the print quality too. You notice the print quality, like you'll get the thing where the line is kind of smashed in on itself, and you can tell it just printed wrong. You see that a lot. Or the binding falls apart. It's cheap glue, or the paper feels cheap. Like the Demons one I have, it got some heavy use, but it's I guess it's not so bad. No, this one's not so bad. I thought it was falling apart, but maybe it's because when I really like a book and I get done,
I forget. Is it a Penguin edition?
I always want to buy like a hardcover after I really like a book. Like I got to get a hardcover of that one so I can keep it, because I know I'm just gonna get destroyed.
Yeah. Well, speaking of books, everybody, please go buy my book. I've had a lot of good sales. And also, don't forget, and I thank everybody who's left reviews. So a bunch of people have left reviews on there. Please leave me a review, a 5-star review on Amazon. Please go ahead and write something on there. I've had some really good reviews on there. That really helps a lot. And I promise that after I sold 100 copies of it, and we're well over 100 copies now, but after that I would work on a second edition. So I'm going to take that one down and put up a second edition with larger print. It's going to take a while. It's very difficult to format verse.
Wait, hold on there. It got pictures in it. Yeah, you got pictures in there, bro.
It's got pictures on the cover, and it's got pictures in the words. That's right. So thank you, Jason. I really appreciate all your support there. So please go to Amazon and buy a copy of my book, Runes. I did buy your book, by the way. It takes me weeks to get stuff down here. It's coming down. I got what else I get? I got Sutri. I got Absalom from Faulkner. Yeah.
I got what else? East of Eden. I never read East of Eden. Got that coming too. So.
That's good. I bought a giant box of books at a secondhand bookstore in Maine, so I've got to make my way through those. I got some really good ones, and
you can find I just ordered stuff, like expensive books for $10 sometimes at those places.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, and you can often find signed copies, which is really nice. I've got a few pretty good signed copies. But it's hard to find those bookstores anymore. It's very difficult, and all the good stuff has been picked through. So it's very difficult. It's hard for those places to exist anymore because of the big, conglomerates or whatever. But I would like to thank a couple people here for some past people supported me big time. with the wedding. So thank you so much for all the support. I want to thank John Adams, who thanked me with a big super chat about 2 weeks ago that I haven't gotten to because of all the stuff going on because of the wedding and the move. So thank you to John Adams. Of course, Ethan, I want to thank you so much for a lot of your support. Thank you so much. Thank you to Amy also. And let's see here. Thank you to Jason for all your support. Really appreciate you. Thank you so much, buddy. And let me try to open up super chats because I had some. I'm going to try to open up this other tab here. So please forget if this goes down. I didn't mean for it to go down. So please forgive me, everybody, if it goes down when I open it. So I hope it won't. But let's see. And thank you to. Okay, please open up. Come on. You guys, if I can't open super chats tonight, please forgive me. I know some people I'm not gonna open it. I can't open it because I'm boomer teching. I'm boomer teching here big time. So please forgive me.
You gotta see the color line. You got ain't nothing to me. Ain't nothing to
Hold on. I'm just afraid this is gonna go down. It's gonna short circuit. Okay. Let's see.
It's gonna explode.
Yeah.
Blow up.
Let's see.
If Thomas Pynchon, if you're watching, if Thomas Pynchon is watching right now, if you could just beam that, with a colored laser beam straight into his frontal lobe, Mr. Pynchon. We're trying.
Here we go. Yeah, thank you to Captain Clutch Studio. Welcome to High Q Book Enjoyer. Thank you to Gorilla Biscuits for donating two memberships. Thank you so much. That's it for the super. I think that's it for the super chats tonight, you guys. But listen, people have supported me with memberships. Please grab a membership. I'll be doing membership stream once a week. I'll be doing books and movies, so I'll be doing that much more regularly now, especially after. This is probably going to be the last stream from here, because I'm moving, so everything's going to be in the new place. And after that, then I'll be doing streams once a week on the membership channel. Thank you to everybody who supported me. I appreciate you. Thank you for all the super chats, especially before, and especially all the PayPal, Venmo. Thanks for buying the book. People are extremely generous here, so I really do appreciate you. Please make sure that you guys go and like and share the stream. Leave a comment afterwards, and please go and follow Tristan Haggard at YouTube. Everybody here knows you. They've been here. People who especially have been here since the beginning know who you are. And thank you to Tristan for donating his time, spending the time with us, going over some literature. I really appreciate it because, especially because I've been doing so many movies lately, it's really great to be able to talk high IQ books with somebody who appreciates books. So I really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate it, man. It's a good excuse to read some good books, and it's you read a book and you just want to I don't know, none of my friends have read any of these books. like nobody I talk to all the time, see in real life every day. I'm like, oh man, you ever read Outer Dark by Cormac McCarthy's 1968 second novel that 30 people have read? I really appreciate it, man. It's nice to bounce ideas off you, and always hitting you up in the DMs and
well, it puts you in an exclusive club as a reader, because not many people read in the first place, and especially in the canon of literature. So all of this stuff, I think, kind of puts us in a select category, and that's good because this is good stuff. So we'll be back hopefully. Yeah, you want to do Child of God?
Yeah, we got to do Child of God. I just read that kind of with you. Child of God's fun.
Yeah, I'm so pumped to do this book because I thought Outer Dark was going to be the one, and it was so good. And then I read Child of Dark. I was like, I don't know. And then I got into it. I was like, oh my God, this is so good. This is such a wild
It's really
book.
Good. I was telling you earlier, I was like, you read some McCarthy novels, and every time I read one, I'm like, is this my favorite McCarthy novel? And I think the best McCarthy novel is whatever one you're currently reading.
Yeah.
But unless it's I've never read The Orchard Keeper, and I probably won't because I've never heard a good thing said about The Orchard Keeper. But
I got it. So I'll read it. I'll read it for you, and I'll let you know.
All right, yeah. I've been trying to find a bad
Yeah.
one, but yeah, I started The Crossing. You know,
Yeah.
I usually start a Cormac McCarthy book thinking I'm not going to like it. And I've just
Yeah.
realized that no, I just got to admit to myself that I usually just end up liking his books through and through. I end up loving them. When I read The Road, I read my friend recommended me The Road because we were having all these conversations, 2008 or so, and I'm like telling him all about freaking Camp FEMA and all the things that are about that.
Yeah.
It was 2008, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
you know, I'm out of my mind, like trying to figure out what's going on in the world. I'm like young, dumb, and full of, you know, no, but so I'm like, and he's telling me, you got to read this book. You read The Road? I'm like, I never heard of The Road. He's like, oh, it's the best. You got to read it. It's really good. It's like the ultimate
It is
question,
awesome,
man. It's the ultimate question.
The book is way more positive than the movie too. The movie's
horrible, nihilistic
horrifying to
slop.
me. Yeah, the book is
Trash.
great.
Dude,
It's
this is
really
like someone's I heard they're making an Outer Dark film. I don't even look, you can't do Outer Dark. You can't do it. It's like Outer Dark, Blood Meridian. They tried with what's it called? All the Pretty Horses. I'm not gonna watch that crap, but you can't do. The only one you could do was No Country for Old Men, and that's a specific case. You know, you can't translate it into film, most of his stuff. And if you try, it's gonna fail.
And the No Country for Old Men is written cinematically. I mean, cinematically, it's supposed to be translated into film, so it works that way. I think
I just feel like if anyone else, like it was like lightning in a bottle. That one, it's like no one. I feel like if someone else tried to make that a year later, if it never got made, it could have flopped, just like The Counselor. The Counselor, I think, should have been a novel. It's when you watch The Counselor, you're like, oh, that's almost great. Like that's like there's just something so that's just you're close, but nope, it just flops every scene. But
it had all of the elements on the outside,
fantastic.
but it was missing the meat that you need for a Cormac McCarthy.
Dude. Like dude, The Road, like for me, The Road is just that ending. Like when she would talk to him sometimes about God. Well, how's it like the last lines of that book? And that the poem where it's like there were once there were brook trout in brook trout in the streams and the mountains, you could see them standing in the amber currents where their white edges of their fins wimpled softly in the flow. It's like that. They were on their backs. There were vermiculate patterns of the world and its becoming. How are you going to put that in film? Like that poem at the end of The Road.
A better version of the movie The Road is the Book of Eli. That's
right, because it's like funny and hokey. Yeah, it's like hokey and funny.
You watch the Book of Eli instead, and then read The Road. So, all right, guys, that's it.
Great.
Thanks, y'all. Appreciate you. Listen, was it worth it? Yeah, it's worth it. It was strong enough. All right, you guys. Peace. Love y'all. Peace.